schools in the identical way are some of the extracurricular events. About 70 runners, taken by. So we try to wear most of the kids are ready to this is what I was going to share, and this is going to super excited about. We had started our garden club. So I saw 35 students. They do a lot of research on current summer property. Work on weeding, cleaning up the prairie garden, the sunshine garden, and the butterfly garden, and also probably we're going to have a little play about this tomorrow. We are doing our so Lisa Gainer, she's a public board member and she connected with my colleagues and also I think is our urban teacher and also our public. We plan to stay. So we're going to talk about the trees and our stuff that we planted. And in addition to that, instead of planting, the students process of preparing the ground for planting. We'll have tree cooking and students how to write the history of the tree using the rings. Additionally, our garden club also search all the trees that we plant on the property and most of what's going to be and so we'll be using those as part of the demonstration. So it should be a great planting experience and learning experience, but I'm just excited to have and also
and I had invited board members if they were interested, and you said it's going to go up from 11:30 till.
It's going to go to 12:30 to the afternoon. Right.
This one is up over.
I did out of the park, the tree, and I'll show the rain. It'll show you if any damage there was fire, if there was like even if like something hit the tree, you know, if they injured it. So it's again we'll talk about it. Miss Sarah, our first aid teacher, teacher said come back. So it's really exciting. Kids are looking forward to it. Teachers are looking forward to it. And I think the rain is going to stop until we learn.
Okay, great. Okay, next is public comments. We have 3 folks in person here.
It is very exciting to hear what for those of you who don't know me, my 3 children attended Central in Hauser for the entirety of their elementary education. So we're 15 years in that I feel really part of the district. So I know a trustee in the village of Riverside. I've been speaking to them on behalf as a community member and as a taxpayer. I'm not his representative. However, Ministerial on the village board does give me some insights into the types of issues we struggle with. It's my understanding that the athletic field behind Central Hauser takes a committee, and I understand wanting to improve that condition. I am deeply concerned, however, that you're proposing to replace a natural deal with farm rubber or other. The fact that we see artificial turf in neighboring communities doesn't make it safe for developing children, good for the environment, or cost effective in the long run. It does mean that the industry is doing a great job marketing what is quite frankly a more and under-regulated application. With regard to health effects, the Toxic Use Reduction Institute out of the University of Massachusetts Lowell is a legitimate governmental unit with a wealth of information on artificial turf, its chemical components, and the manner in which these products degrade. Please take a look at their research and then ask if you want to risk exposing developing children to known endocrine disruptors, known carcinogens, and suspected carcinogens for any number of years, but possibly not if they're like my children who attended both cycles. Then there are the environmental considerations. This would introduce microplastics and other leachates into our soil and groundwater, both in Riverside, and then its eventual home in the landfill somewhere. It will replace what is a natural and living space that sequesters carbon and gives off oxygen with a product that requires fossil fuels to produce. And this, just as regional climate action plans around the country, including Chicago area, are being implemented to reduce our CO2 emissions by 50% of the terminal biomass by 2030. This would be a step back. The district could be a leader in setting positive environmental standards. Actions always speak louder than words when it comes to living things that sometimes doing the right thing is tough and takes more work. I will share that the village just voted last month to improve the soccer fields at Indian Gardens without introducing synthetic materials into our environment. Just excavation, regrading with gravel, soil, and weeds. Will there be maintenance costs? Yes. Will those costs exceed the costs associated with installing, maintaining, disposing of, and installing synthetic surfaces? No. These products only last for so long before they begin to degrade and fail to provide the surface injury protection we advertise. We need to look at the costs over a longer period of time in order to get an accurate picture of what you're asking this community to take on. I will forward to you some information compiled by the Tax Abuse Reduction Institute and their website has case studies where municipalities have gone through these longer-term life cycle analyses. Whether you look at a 16-year, a 25-year, or a 50-year period, natural grass, soil-based fields are always going to be more positive. Now, when I told my youngest son about the proposal for the artificial turf, his response was, "Oh no, that field is iconic." And I said, "It is?" And he said, "Yes. Even though I wasn't great at sports, some of my best memories of school are of just being out there on that field with the feel of grass underneath my feet." So there's a lot to think about, and including what kind of legacy you want to leave for the community and volunteer future.
Thank you. All right. So our list here is Jacqueline Miller.
Hello, I'm Jennifer Miller. Both of my kids went to Central and Harvard for the full 9 years. Then graduated in 2017, and Jared graduated last year. So I do have a lot of experience. And for other reasons, I have a certain amount of experience with pressures that we're under and the various things you have to consider, and the various constituencies you have to consider when you're making these decisions. But I think it's a really great opportunity. Actually, in many ways, we're lucky to be here at this time on the board and have a chance to build on redesigning this space, which has not been redesigned, but has been needing redesign for decades. I did say this in my comments, but I wanted to get to the So the first thing I wanted to say was, I hope that before you make decisions how you're going to redesign this space and what amenities include, think first of all about principles, what you are going to do, and who can share this message. What's in the best interest of the students of the school? It's terrible. Students right now today, the students that have been using this space for decades, Second, of course, is your fortunately, foresight or not costing money. That's what it seems to me. Before I get to the dispute between artificial turf and natural grass, I did get a chance to look at this afternoon. I was able to presentation. I think there's a lot of really nice things in the plan. I really like the through line along the side between the property and but before you get, I got the sense that I'm not sure if the architects have, again, advice for community should provide the additional green space, the upper space, but there's still a lot of things. If you're thinking about the interests of children in the schools, they don't really care about that. They don't park. They don't care. Doesn't matter. That they want to do outside. For decades, again, it's not their space for kids to enjoy themselves outdoors. That I don't even know how students get to go outside during the time unless they happen to have an opportunity. My understanding is that when they go to lunch, after the lunch period is done, and this could have changed with the redesign the schedule, they sit in the auditorium, they stay inside, they're not allowed to go outside. So I think, to me, what should be done is you need to assess how much space can you use to have a reset, outdoor reset, for all the kids on the same day, as well as school. So what I was told this afternoon was that, in fact, the field itself has been shrunk. I understand there's one more green space, and there's a playground, and there's a basketball court, and there's a consider those. I think it would be a shame if after this whole process was spent, we came to a point where we still didn't have kids in second grade, third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, didn't even have. So there are many other places to park. Getting to the issue of artificial versus natural, we definitely agree with all the comments and you're not at a sports complex. You're not to soccer. This place where there are young children who are going to be exposed to unknown. But if, despite that, determine good, solid statistics about the cost of architecture, non-installation, future, or replacement, grand skills need to be placement. At that point, I asked it when they have to do the diligence, say, look at the actual cost of those in the area, and for decide after all that, there's other reasons that an architect is still really desirable. I would ask if you consider having both. If you cut down the parking a tremendous amount, and that you have open architecture and you have no grass space. And then one last thing I just want to say was about permeability. I didn't include a little bit of this in my comment. Just as much as possible, I think trying to have the surfaces that are permeable, that is pervious asphalt, pervious concrete, and all the rest. And one thing I thought about when I was looking at that parking lane that goes through there, that pass through the side, inside the parking lot. And certainly, I think you may have an expert on civil engineering on your board, but I would wonder when it rains, where's that water going to go to? It seems to me it's either going to go to the neighboring property, or it's going to go to the field. And it's something. So perhaps something like that. Thank you very much.
Great. Next is Yvonne Lucero.
Yeah, so I'm on the same topic, but I'm not quite as detailed and eloquent as Aberdeen, who is a lawyer. I'm a retired physician, but I'm a retired rehabilitation medicine. So let me just add before I get going that the jury is still out as far as professional athletics with respect to the kind of injuries and the recovery period for injured on so this is a letter that was actually sent to the board office, but just for everyone's sake, let me read it. It was generated by the Olmsted Society with the Chinese current president. And it says, dear District 96 School Board, it's coming to the attention of the Olmsted Society that plans to renovate the space behind Houses Junior High may include converting the current green space with synthetic turf. We do not support the use of synthetic turf when the surface is due to interest, non-contact injury, potential toxicity, and other risks, such as the spread of staph infections, because in fact it does require cleaning, and in this case, I can't vouch for which animals may cross the path of this field, but they are not going to be shut out the way they would be on a professional playing surface. There would certainly be dogs, deer, raccoons, etc., who may decide to cross that space and leave something behind. Surveys and recent research are contained in the following links, which were part of the letter. It appears that more research is needed to fully gauge the risk, and we ask the precautionary approach. The Olmsted Society very much supports children playing outside and better utilization of available space for recess and physical education. And we strongly support expansion of the green space with proper site preparation, including sand, kept properly, and grass, natural grass turf. Students could play and have physical education classes in space that would be illuminated. The Olmsted Society asks that the school board increase the potential for green space in keeping with Frederick Law Olmsted's overall plan for the village and in the best interest of children's health and consideration and for all who use the
Any other public comments? Via email? Any further public comments here? For our agenda. Next is changes to the agenda. Are there any proposed changes to the agenda this evening? Right, and that will take us to the committee reports. The first one here is facilities.
Thanks, Dan. Well, today we've got representatives from DOA to present the current proposal for the space under consideration at the existing housing. Intro with,
I would just say that this is another iteration of a plan that has been for a long time in coming and being considered, and that this is not even a final plan, that this is sort of the next step in the process, and appreciate the feedback that we're already getting. And we did have an opportunity to talk this afternoon with staff as we dedicated to the advisor that we would present this information to staff, listen to it, and send it to the board. We have about either 9 teachers that joined us this afternoon and shared their informal feedback with us. It was a good conversation.
Discussing this area for the past 2 years now. Planning and initial concepts, and this is those.
And I continue to say it is indeed a sort of a complex constellation of meeting our goals of absolutely separating play and parking to a better ability and increasing the outdoor play and overall use of the space. We do, our current understanding is we have parking requirements that we do have to meet for staff parking. Had some insight that may or may not be changing, but we continue to think about that. So lots in the plan. Probably best to turn it over to Ryan.
Please.
Evening, board members. Thank you for making time again. So I'll walk you through some of the concepts. As you remember, the board approved master plan. But we had some really 4 major goals in that master plan, spread out over 3 phases. We want to look at parking, pick up and drop off, design recreational field, central and outdoor, as well as some sort of outdoor classroom. So here, so what we look at here is separation of really parking and play. It's a big one we talked about it in several of the schools. So what we see here is the main through line and pedestrian thoroughfare. So what we want to look at is how we bring kids walking and biking central house in through the site from north to south. So we've got is a large, probably 10 or 12 foot wide sidewalk, one lane for bikes, one lane for pedestrians, separated from the parking by a fence. What that does is it brings all the students directly in toward the school. So that path starts to carve up the site in ways that create different zones within that back area. So on the right, you've got an accessible playground with new equipment, which is the area down here. And then to the left, you've got an outdoor classroom sort of gathering space and the backside of housing. So it's going to bring kids safely through the parking lots and allow them to either play or continue to the school. On the left, we're seeing here a park escape area where you've got half-court basketball, foursquare, and non-league. And then to the north of that, the recreation field. We talked about a different option for that. I think that either option has both some site utility requirements for it, also it's part of it, part of the design, direction to go. So all of that is something we consider. Something that we've changed here is this through lane from Woodside to Aiken-side. And there we're thinking that would be staff only parking. One thing that I'm working with our traffic engineers, we're trying to alleviate some of the pickup and drop off issues. That lane would be closed down during pickup and drop off. So that way you're not going to have cars trying to come into the site this way. And then it also creates some early arrival and parking for staff. A couple of things that came out of some observations from our traffic engineer is some of the congestion on Woodside. We're still working with them and their recommendations to help alleviate some of that. We think that by creating this loop in the back, bringing people in one way and out again on Aiken-side gives an opportunity for encouraged pickup and drop off for housers. It allows cars to queue on site as opposed to stacking on Aiken-side. And by doing that, would alleviate some of the congestion on Woodside. So Woodside's plenty wide enough to be able to accommodate parking on both sides and pick up and drop off in a safe way. So we feel like that will and as we look at the back entrance to Hauser, this is really in its early development. We're thinking that is not only a congregation space. Today earlier we talked about, maybe that could be plantings, gardens, definitely up to the classroom in some sort. So creating these different zones to try to accomplish those larger goals. Bigger goal of separating parking and play and supporting the safer pickup and drop. So as we work forward in this, obviously we'll get further into the details There's probably some additional traffic recommendations for that. But this is kind of the next step in where we are. So we have that delicate balance with permeability, with parking requirements, with green space. We want to maximize all of those things in the efforts to school learning. Questions? That's kind of the general step where we are now. Sorry, what?
What was the age of the different in the box?
Yeah, so most of that equipment would probably be age 3 or 5 to focus on central. Some of the equipment would be older, 5 to
Grade
12.
3 and 5, you mean grade 3 and 5?
Age, yes, I'm sorry.
I'm gonna say
Yeah.
that.
Just, I could see your face share, you were mask up. Yeah. Yeah. The playground in the front is more, young.
And
Yeah.
that is remaining.
Yeah.
So they need that work rate. Right, but it's an additional space for the remainder of the
Grades
place. No,
3
I
to
want to
5
make sure.
would focus, primarily grades 3 to 5 would focus on central. There would be some older focused equipment for housing. The reality is probably more escape.
One of the things we had talked about earlier on in the process is we talked to the two principals and said, is it possible to maybe not schedule any middle of the day Hauser PE classes so that Central can have sort of full access to all of that for their lunchtime recess? And we think that's doable, just not any, whatever that would be, for the 6th period PE or something. So there are some structural things that we can probably address the organization schedule with staff supervision, et cetera.
Yeah, and I think again, we're at the early stages of this, looking at scheduling some of that operation. How much green space is really an interest versus soft surface, hardscape. If Hauser is going to do recess here, then maybe that configuration shifts a little bit.
Now, noting some of the public comments that we've heard, right now, you're showing parking according to what the village zoning requirements recommend.
Right now, we're showing a little bit less actually. So we're showing a little bit more than existing. There's about 84 spaces there currently. We're right at 100, which is less than was ordinance. So that's something that, again, that would be a balance of all of these things that we'll have to engage.
And that comes to negotiations and discussions with the village and whatever that's also that we look for on public.
So I know in an email we received earlier, there was mention of possibly those requirements changing with the parking. Is that something?
Not that the GLA and I are aware of.
Yeah, I'm not aware of that.
Yeah. So we did plan based on that.
Is that something?
I have mentioned something. Zoning point, potentially changing, because it's still being considered the.
Like Jack said, I would love that, the perfect world is all the outdoor spaces. However, we have to follow, whatever we follow, so we just want to make sure that
And that was why.
Yeah. unless it's changing in the other way, then we don't.
Parking permits generally the portions of the size of the lot. So for example, like Hollywood wants to.
Brookfield, so they're a little bit different. Riverside is super classroom,
That's the one part.
but it's the same. Riverside is
Same,
super classroom.
Right,
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
the.
Yes, and it's.
We're still assuming that there's going to be.
That's not, they're not really permitted, it's just they're not restricted to not.
There's no fire.
Yeah. Yeah. So they have a placard, but there's no, there's no signage on one side that says, you know, you can only park for 2 hours. There's, on the school side, there's restrictions during pickup and drop off time, but on the opposite side of the street,
Which
is unrestricted. And actually, that is, you know, my sense, my experience looking at that pretty regularly, it's always pretty fully parked. But I think that is mostly staff parking there.
And that's, and
Yeah.
we're still assuming
Well,
that.
it
Yeah.
should be behind, you're right
Yeah.
behind that.
That whole workshop is.
Or-
I think what we're trying to propose in this is alleviate some of that on the side by allowing the staff only parking to the west there. Part of some of the observations on the other side is that the safe parking restriction that's on the school side is not on the other side of the street. If that existed, it might be a little bit safer and allow that to be two-way all the time. What also was observed is that one way sometimes without posted time creates a lot of confusion. You know, they saw a near miss of someone trying to get into that western drive during pickup and drop off. So those are the types of things we're trying to eliminate. So that western drive, while it's sort of ill positioned between the wood side and the neighbor intersection. Right, so if that was goes off during the drop off hours, but again,
Parking and drop off and pick up on the right or I'm there every day. I mean, it's for families and caregivers to pick up. It was just a lot better if people would park for 2 hours. You know,
Is that what you mean? They're staying longer than
oh, you know,
yeah.
they're which I don't blame them. They want their spot, they're ready to go. But it's not what you're supposed to do. But the sign says it's the parking between hours. Had it worked, it might be pleasant.
To your point, Sherry, I spent some time watching that. When the village has time to allow an officer to be there, it works really well.
I'm fine with that. I didn't really know.
Well, and it's
Good officers support a good amount. Yeah.
It's just that they can't do it all the time.
No,
And when they're not, people start to get their free.
There's an officer there that
well, and there's a bustling, honestly,
Yeah.
there's a lot of, right from my district, there was this place, people there, I realized this. That's their job, I did it other schools. You go on, you know, like this practice.
Yeah, I think sometimes where I've seen staff, and I think maybe it's even happens here at Blight, is that staff will kind of help patrol and pick up drop off line, which actually they do in the back of the school area.
Right.
And then in the front, they're out there, and essentially, like you mentioned, that even when a police officer might be there, that families that kind of get their spot to wait for their child to come out, their child takes longer than they should. You know, that's an interesting question. I think the question would be more like, how do you keep a process moving as opposed to putting staff in a position of sort of trying to enforce it.
And I don't think we need our staff, I mean, maybe we are as well.
I think any of these designs need an operational plan.
Yeah.
For, that's just for the central house.
And encourage pickup and drop off and
Drop off.
help alleviate some of those sides, so.
And one caveat I'll add, we've gone through many different processes and placards with names, and you drive up and pick up your assigned child, and it's nothing is foolproof, so something that works.
And
But
it's,
don't
it's, I think what's interesting in this design too is that it's a queue up off the vacant side for much longer, many more cars can get off the street, right, and move through there. And again, I think we'd want the input from the traffic engineer. Does that mean that maybe more kids could be dropped off, like a whole nother grade level, you know, because I think the more you can do in the back just alleviates that.
Right, because now it's fourth and fifth, and then I wonder what happens, you still have the little ones coming out in the front. And I guess, would you still have the children that walk, where would the children that walk get to their crosswalk when you have changed the lineup?
Off of Vacant side?
Right,
So I believe there's a crosswalk right here.
right, I'm just saying, where do
Yeah.
they walk in between the cars then? If you have
No,
the
they walk,
circular-
if you keep going to the left.
They're gonna walk all the way that
this-
way, okay.
Yeah, so they would walk over and down.
There's a path on both sides, isn't there?
There is, the path in the parking lot is really for people that are parking, so they have a safe way.
Yeah, I'm just saying, there's a bunch of kids that walk and ride their bikes, you know.
Can you
like-
imagine
There was a fence there, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Where you just
something.
pointed, you know.
Yeah.
So they're not in the line of the cars since we changed the flow a little bit, okay.
I realize
So
it's
it's
hard to see from it's small from this angle, just,
Do we have
to
this
get up and
updated?
take a look.
Can we resend this maybe, because I have so many different iterations of this plan, would that be possible? to send?
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
I don't
dying
think I
for an
have
attachment
one.
on the meeting,
Yeah.
I agree.
Right.
Sure, I mean, this is the same plan, and axonometric, so it gives you a little bit of an idea of how that, the cars would circulate through the site, pick up and drop off at the rear, and then it's really hard to see, but blue lines would be the pedestrian circulation, the kids on the inside of the fence, the recreation
Okay.
field.
If you don't have another slide, but can you describe the hardscape area more?
Sure.
That's up against Hauser.
Same slide, but a zoomed in view. The hardscape is not determined yet, but I mean, we imagine it to be permeable pavers. We know we have a threshold that we want to meet, so that's a good way to, especially adjacent to the recreation field. Whatever the top surface is, the bottom surface will have a drainage system under it, so the two actually work well together.
This feels very similar to the design, like site design for Ames, and we have a lot of challenges with permeable space. Like, how do you see that playing out with what we have
So I
here?
was gonna ask,
Yeah, we haven't run the numbers yet. There's more space here. Ames was a much tighter site. So I think that, until we really run the numbers, I can't tell you. I think we have some good solutions. There's more area to do infiltration pits if we need to. There's more parking where we can do permeable pavers as we did at Ames to, contribute to that. And again, we use pervious concrete, which we can do here for hardscape. So I think there's a lot of solutions that we've already tested at Ames that could apply here as well.
Yeah, okay, but you didn't feel as big of a challenge because of the
Just
quantity
because
of
of
space that you
the
have?
size of the site gives us more options.
Okay.
did you anticipate that the current parking lot where the cars, the staff park would be torn up for drainage prevention no matter what? Or do you see it remaining as it is and just change for this dimension?
No, there's some site utility work that needs to be done as part of this. That parking lot is ready to be replaced anyway, so it will be removed and replaced. Yeah.
Have there been any considerations to different types of, like a larger, just a bigger system to hold all that water, even more than what might be next door? Because we get so much heavy rainfall lately, it just seems to come all at once.
Yeah, and similar to what we did at Ames as well, we had both under the playground and the parking lot, large infiltration pits, so that it stores the water to some degree, it slows the runoff and cleans it. So that's certainly something we would consider here, and something we would definitely have to do, given the size of the site, given the size of the parking lot. There's going to be some restrictions from the village as well as MWRD.
You said the parking is actually more than what we currently have, but less than what would be required by the village.
Correct.
So maybe more a question for you, Joel, like, where do you see that going as far as variances? I mean, that was a very lengthy process.
Well, we've still got, I think, the overflow parking, as it were, is
Okay.
what ends up on Woodside.
We can count that?
That's the compromise with the village that we have right now, so.
Oh, okay.
Woodside and Lincoln.
I think when we start to talk about parking, and I'm honestly a big fan of letting everyone park on the streets, so let me say that up front. There tends to be a lot of pushback from the neighbors. Many people, not necessarily anyone in this room, tends to believe that the street in front of their house is theirs and no one should be ever there who they do not know. So that's where street parking gets to be a community issue.
Yeah, I mean, the people on Riverside deal with that all the time, so it's really a matter of, it's either education or it's compromise.
And that's.
Or it's hours of parking and how, like, Oak Park deals with this, and they have hours that people at the school can park. Yeah.
But that's, there's more people to negotiate with, more compromises too.
Because I'm kind of, I mean, with you and Linda both, I'd love to see as much of this to be not parking as possible, but, you know, while we have other options, like, I don't think it's reasonable to expect people to park. I mean, you gotta pay for parking in some of the other village spots, and to try to have somebody park on the other side of the tracks, and then you've got train traffic and stuff. Like, I think we do need to make sure that the parking is available on this side of the tracks, and is there enough street parking, and are people gonna be okay with that? Yeah, there's a lot of different.
I would say something to consider in that scenario as well is, you know, not just during the day, but then after hours as well. With both Central and Hauser there are a lot of after-hours performances, a lot of classes, a lot of times I've, as a parent, have not been able to find a spot in the lot that's there currently. If you're forcing that traffic out to the streets, that again, that's makes me wonder about the impact to the neighborhood.
The other thing is you will often see concerns, I'm not going to say actualized, but concerns or perceptions about if you have to walk a certain distance, it gets perceived as unsafe. Whether or not that's true or not. A lot of what I'm referring to is it's perceptions. There's a lot of perceptions that we have to address as we move forward.
Yeah, I do think in what we try to do with this is strike a balance between learning space, green space, and pulling some of that pickup and drop off on the site to alleviate what's happening on the wood side. So, we'll continue to develop it, but that's a general idea.
So if we take in, just remove the parking spot on this, I guess, south side of it.
The angled parking?
No, not the angled part, like the actual parking lot part. And I'm just looking at the recreation field, the hardscape space, the landscaping, the playground, not parking. Is that more or less space that we have for play and learning aggregated? I know the field, I can't tell the dimensions. Like, is that field the same size as it is, and then we're just repurposing the current parking lot on the backside to that more educational playground space, and the parking lot is still the same parking lot spot, or like how do the dimensions change from what we have today?
Yeah, the parking lot's about the same.
Okay.
The recreation field is smaller in width to allow for that staff parking and through lane, but it's only about a bit.
Okay.
So,
I mean, it looks like you're still getting a full baseball field based on, if I'm reading your sort of like casual
So
outlets
that's,
here.
we don't have space for a full-size soccer field on that field, but it's a U10 and a baseball field as well. Literally.
Right now, remember, I mean, I know you all know this, Central students play really just on blacktop in that back area. There's no playground structure. So that's, to me, that's a significant addition, change, right?
Yeah.
That was one of our goals, to create a playground. The playground in the front is built for younger children. It's a, what are they, three to 5 years of age,
yeah.
3 to 6 years of age. I did talk to Mr. Gatz. I mean, that's still very much needed for, in anticipation of full day kindergarten and first grade, also plays on that playground. It's really kind of just set up for that. He would prefer not to lose that at all, and then to gain this additional space in the back.
Although I think you said you don't anticipate most of the children at Riverside being able to play in the playground, is it just because of its size that they would be to the recreation field?
No, I just said I think that the Hauser kids might be
Well,
more
yeah, they don't
drawn
have
to.
races right now, but I'm thinking about the Central kids, I wonder.
So one of the things we did, I think at both Ames and at Hollywood, is we made sure there were equipment pieces that were appropriate for different age levels. So even though the bulk of the playground may be more, like you said, that 3rd through 5th grade, it doesn't mean that it would be off limits for K1 or K2. And we might want, again, that hasn't been done yet, that part of the,
Little for the older kids.
yeah. Yeah, what I was trying to say is I think there's a nice amount of play space for central students during their lunch recess, if we can structure it so that Hauser PE is not outdoors at the same time.
As we get a little further along in this, in particular, when talking about playgrounds, I don't know if there's, what the ability is to collect, to do market research, I guess, on the playground that's at Ames in terms of what's getting used and what's not. I understand it's very popular, so popular that we have trouble getting people to leave sometimes, but still, what works and what didn't, I guess, is what I'm wondering if the staff at Ames could be helpful in collecting that information.
I think maybe the student at Ames could
Or
come over and
student at Ames,
explain.
yes, absolutely, even better.
Yeah.
Well, and the Hollywood Walk as well.
Yeah,
Good
definitely.
point, Dan. We probably do have some good informal feedback there.
How does that playground space compare to Hollywood versus Ames?
That's about the same size as Hollywood. It's right around 5,000 square feet.
And it's gonna be focused on grades 3 to 5, which would be, what, 9 to 8 to all of the third graders, 8, 9, I have third graders, so they're 8 to 9.
They bring in general add 5 to the grade level.
12, yeah, that's a good,
Yeah.
okay, so what, I mean, is the idea then to just because I mean, I don't know, I personally feel like that front lot, or that smaller, like, something needs to be done with, like, we need to tear that out, that's something new. But would that be more the K1, 2, and this would be the 3, 4, 5 in the back?
Yes.
Yeah.
The
Potentially, yeah.
front is-
Because I don't think you can do anything different with that front space, other than just put a better playground.
They don't
there,
play
right?
out there so much at lunch.
okay.
Well, they do, right? Yeah,
They do.
it's the K will be here for lunch, right?
And the players,
Yeah.
you just take them
Yeah.
out periodically depending on,
And it might just be like, one, certain classes get the playground on one day, and then the other group gets the field, or, you know, I mean, again, so kids are pretty good with sort of those rules, and we set up those structures, but I think we need time to figure that out, yeah.
I think the front used to functionally work well, in my opinion, this is my opinion, until they changed the scape of all the stonework was done kind of badly, I think. It was badly conceived and very sharp and awkward, and so I think if that could be softened in more a little bit, I don't know. I'm not in charge of that kind of thing. It just felt like it was done in
We've
a
had
weird
some-
way with what was already there.
We've had some complaints about that space. Recently Weston was there at a parent leadership team meeting.
Yeah.
And that's what started my conversation, like, could that just go away in preparation for having something in the back? And it was like, no, we probably would still need both.
I personally would
Yeah.
advocate for that. It's used
Yeah.
all the time, and even the preschoolers will play on it.
Yeah.
Just fix it.
Make it
Just
improve it.
just to fix it, yeah, because it's, in the PTO, Linda knows all about this, was so generous years ago and donated it, correct? I would hate to lose.
Like before my time, but.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we were never
Stories,
that, yes, but I would hate to lose that playground space.
Yeah. And that was what Mr. Gatz was saying too. No, he's like, no, we need that.
It's
Maybe
really,
improve it.
even the older kids after school will pop
Yeah.
over there.
Yeah.
Those pods that are in the back of the playground,
Mhm.
obviously, on the blacktop, obviously those will go away for maintenance.
The plan is for those to go away, yes.
Because they're those large pod
Yes.
structures, and I'm not sure what's in there, but I would assume we'd have a different plan for.
Well, and Ryan, this
Yeah.
may be less important to this group, but point out one of the
Yeah, we-
modifications to the maintenance garage that
I
you
mean,
would
there are some
recommend.
building modifications we've been making. That's not working. So for the central entry is just to the left of that, behind the playground is, there's a overhead door into the maintenance garage. So obviously move that around the corner, which would work much better for deliveries, pick up and drop off of materials, as well as kitchen deliveries. So there's a little bit of reorganization that needs to happen back here. So the idea is that we're separating the service side of the building over to the left, where you can see the trash enclosure, and then bringing play and learning over.
We wouldn't have the basketball hoops where they are now, we move them over to the.
We move them over to the hardscape, yeah.
And then, as he's saying, the deliveries, the garage, essentially the garage doors for deliveries would be right off those parking spots as opposed to coming into the, but now we're saying that's the area where it's supposed to be for bikes, kids, pedestrian.
And that's mostly like box trucks and stuff like that, so that would be.
It's food service delivery, and then it's like occasionally it's office supplies, other maintenance supplies that come in.
I mean, they have large drop-offs, but we will do all those turning radiuses, the fire trucks, garbage trucks.
Oh, yeah, fire
So,
truck,
Well, and there's a church there, so I was hoping to be in communication with them so they'd understand any impact to there's residents there.
Right, right.
Which needs to be remembered, I think.
I don't think this changes anything to them because of the existing parking lot bus directly up against their.
I know, I'm just
Right.
talking about large trucks that never used to be there all of a sudden next to their home. I'm just
Oh,
wondering.
the garbage trucks are right there.
Yeah.
There's a
I
dumpster
know,
right there now.
I'm just trying to speak for somebody that's not here, so, because I don't even know them, I just know that there's a family there.
Does the current design meet our needs for like formal sporting events?
No, no. So we don't play soccer on our own field now. This really, as Ryan said, it's really not any bigger. So they would still be playing soccer off-site. It does work better for maybe practices. They practice on the field there now when it's functional. I mean, part of what we've talked about, right, is the idea that it's often mud.
Yeah.
So, but it would be a practice field, but not a playing field.
Yeah,
Not a,
recreation
Yeah,
field and
yeah.
not a play field.
Do we do any official activities on this field today?
PE class.
No, like after, like any kind of baseball or any kind of other school comes into play or?
Just Little League, still using for T-ball?
As I said, it is big enough to do Little League or U10 soccer.
Yeah, so I said I don't have
Beyond
Little
that,
Leaguers, so I don't know if that's still the.
I know in the summer I would see sometimes children out there. I always felt like it was sort of it was more of a practice than a game.
I think when I was at that age, I think it was only the kindergarten T-ball. And then all the other ones are mostly at Harrington.
And they must
Yeah.
be a big ballpark, and do what they need to do, yeah.
So we're not trying to make this school functional needs, like school sports needs.
I mean, that was something the PE department asked us many months ago when we first embarked on all of this. And, you know, it's raised an interesting question. If we were able to really modify parking requirements, would we rethink that? But, you
How
know,
much more space do we need?
to go from a U10 to a,
Oh, wow.
Double.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's probably.
Really?
Yeah.
I think there was idea that we wouldn't get regulation.
Yeah.
I mean, a regulation soccer field is 300 feet, and we've got, I think, 130 feet here in length, so.
So to paraphrase what you're saying, the only way to make this a regulation field would be to take all the parking off-site.
Yeah,
That's what I heard.
Pretty close.
that's pretty close.
Or underground.
Without actually drawing.
Oh,
That'll
that's
help
not
with our
expensive
drainage.
at all.
Sorry.
They're parking, right? Will we be seeing any comparative data for natural services and drainage options versus artificial? I haven't seen that yet.
Absolutely. I mean, I guess my question back to you is what sort of comparative data you're looking for?
What's necessary, what would be necessary to make it functional if it was natural? Because if it gets muddy, what are we not doing
Yeah.
that other places are doing
Mhm.
that could be done? And similar drainage for the other options, and what types of, yeah, how do you make it work and functional?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we could bring a section of both and look at those and what that would entail and provide costs to both of those. Very similar under drainage systems. It's just the cover surfaces.
Cost would definitely be very interesting. I think when we spoke on this before, it was our understanding, or what I remember from the presentation, was that artificial surfaces were purported to be less, and I guess what we're hearing from folks in the community, maybe that's not the case. I honestly don't know. But I would love to hear more on that, on why it might be one way or the other.
Cost or maintenance? Which are you looking for?
Cost or maintenance, I guess definitely inclusive of all
It's all
costs.
paid for.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the drainage is kind of like sort of a Sherry, like, my biggest concern is we do all this work and then we still can't use the grass.
Yeah.
Half the year. So how much drainage do we really need to do so that when it rains like it did yesterday, I can use the field today? Because that seems like a lot, but maybe it's not, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the reality that has to be stated, that you're not going to get the same usability out of grass as you will out of turf. Now, that doesn't make turf the right solution. It
Yeah.
just is a reality. So,
If you were to take yesterday's rain as a test case, you probably could use a grass surface today, or as a turf surface you could, because of the drainage. It is different.
Yeah.
Although,
But
I
we
know,
can try to get the comparison.
yeah, I was just wondering, Ms. Miller, who wrote us a note, had some, I don't know if you guys watched the link, but the link to the facility in Massachusetts that actually does all of their sports and recreation with natural turf, and it had to do with the aeration processes and height of the grass being changed, and what you normally do. So I'd be interested in knowing if you guys have heard about those options, and do you have data, I guess, to back up all of these things? But too, I just want to see all of it and
Sure.
be able to look at it.
We'll need to see both first costs,
Right.
which is what installation, and then what does long-term maintenance look like?
Yeah.
And how hard is it?
Yeah.
And you can guess at costs, but I think noting what the processes are. The artificial turf requires certain equipment. How often? How do you keep it clean to jump to Sally's point? With grass, we have the mud and the mowing, and how does that look? And that, some of those, you get where I'm going. I
Yeah,
think
each
Sherry may
have
have said
their
it better than I
own,
did already.
Maintenance protocols, and you can provide all that information.
Something
Each have their own
descriptive.
costs.
Yeah, I think that, I think something that's worth pointing out, so one of the drivers to even considering artificial turf was the PE department, because that's PE, that's outdoor recreation, formal PE class. They also have kind of that, it's not really a track, but you know, the parking lot is striped for running track-like activities. When we do this, if we were to do this, we take that away. We really say, you are not playing, you are not running, you are not doing relays, you're doing nothing in that parking lot, that is for cars. And so that grass area has to be usable.
Right.
So, and I'm not saying, I mean, to share my own opinion, I'm very torn on it. I hear the importance of usability, and I hear the other environmental concerns. So I think just more analysis on how we figure that out. But I know, and I don't mean the PE department, but it represents an important part of our curriculum. If they felt that that space was now even less usable, then we haven't addressed a problem that we set out to address.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. If we haven't increased the usability to a substantial degree, then I don't see the point in spending the money.
Although I personally would like to just ask that everyone also consider, besides dollars, consider those other long-term costs. Whether they be, does it blend with the rest of the community? Is it going to leave strange little microplastics everywhere? These are things that will remain in our community, and whoever's nearby, and we just, something to consider. You know, what is it worth? And do the children have to run in that space? If we have a large community, why? I asked, we had remember we had the interim superintendents, and they were going to not allow the kids to run around Hauser because they thought it wasn't safe. I think someone might take them, and I kept wondering, why are we not using more of the natural space in the community for the kids? And I get that it's a logistical thing, but I still wonder, why are they not able to enjoy what we have here as much as they can? So that would just be something I would ask them to consider besides just dollars. I realize it's complicated, I'm not saying it's not.
I mean, Wesley, to your point, I still think the safety aspect of separating parking and play is, because you're like, if it doesn't increase usability, what's the purpose? I mean, I think that in itself is one of the main points of
Yeah,
interest
but
for
we
me.
could do all of this and leave the mud pit and save ourselves $3 million. I mean, if we're not gonna make it not a mud pit, why would we spend the money on that particular space? I guess
Yeah.
I'm like, if you carve it out into pieces, like you could still do everything else and
And just
not
leave the
touch that
grass.
rec field. It's gonna be garbage. Like, why spend money to improve it to be just as unusable as it is today? I guess is
I still
kind of
wonder
where I'm
why,
coming from.
I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, I was just thinking, like, what have we done to actually prevent it from being muddy? I
Well,
don't
nothing,
remember,
yeah.
I don't think we've done anything.
No,
So I'd
you
love
gotta
to
dig it up and
see,
then you hit all kinds
what
of
is
other
it that we
hurdles.
do, we're literally doing nothing. So what is it that other places do that have natural surfaces that have successful fields? And I think they exist, and I would love to see it, because we don't do those things. Of course it's muddy, because the grass is not there, and,
That very comment may turn on what DLA brings to us in terms
Yeah, that's
of the options of a super high quality natural design versus an artificial design.
I think the answer to that is those maintenance programs are what you do.
Yeah.
And you have to use.
over the long term, or it would be a waste of money.
And there is an improving what's happening underground too, right? I mean, there is,
Absolutely.
I think no matter what you do, there has to be some drainage issues, and I'm sure NWRD would have something to say about that anyway. but
Absolutely.
Anytime you go in there, we've heard about it, we know that you know.
Yes.
Thank you, I really appreciate the natural teaching space in the back, I think that's, the classroom is really great, the classroom space that we don't have currently. I think that's really nice.
So Joel, as far as this process is going, like, are we starting to whittle, like, this is sort of the singular design that we're now tweaking, or rather than 3 or 4 different, because like last time it was like very different
Correct,
options.
we had gone through 3 options with, I can't think of the firm's name.
Lakota
Thank you,
and
Lakota
Guelph
and
Hamilton.
Guelph
Yeah.
Hamilton. They had presented us with 3 different options, very different. This has many of what we kind of keyed in on as what we were looking for. The separation, better arrangement of the parking, keeping the through route between Akenside and Woodside. That was debated at one point. Do you still maintain it or not? I think the fire department would prefer to have access on the west side of the building. The outdoor, sorry, right here.
Yeah.
Oh, that they can come through.
Having the fire department be
Yeah.
able to come into this driveway and have access to that half the building, or bring their trucks here and send people in.
Yeah,
That's, they want access. They do not like restrictive access.
course,
It's just, that's how emergencies.
And they can't do that today because they probably can't make that.
Well,
turn
now
back
you
there.
can, but
You can do
there
it,
was an
yeah.
option that blocked that
Right,
driveway.
right.
Gotcha.
That
That's
doesn't
what
make
I'm
sense.
saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
But then the open spaces at the very back of Hauser, where those are more of outdoor reading areas, whatever you want to call them, compromises with, in speaking to the teachers at Hauser about trying to push the activities, outdoor activities further away from the school so that gym class doesn't disrupt the classroom environment, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So.
Conceptually, I like this design, and I think it's just like, if we were to land on this, I could support the stuff that's here, and then it's just a matter of like, what do you put in, like, what do you use, you know, all that kind of stuff, but I like the schematic.
To Ryan's point, and something that Sherry had said, that we know that WT Engineering did a looked at the underground infrastructure in that back parking lot. There's a number of sewers that have failed or are on the verge of failing. We know we've got the water main that we're going to install, so we know there is work that is going to tear that up, that area up, no matter what, at some point in the future.
Right.
Yeah, so I think next steps, we'd like to get the final input from our traffic engineer, see if there are any tweaks we want to propose to you about this plan, and then engage the village early, talk about this plan, talk about parking, identifying variances if you guys are interested in this proposal, identifying the variances we might have to address so we can do that early, build that into that schedule.
Martha, are we gonna do some, like, community stuff like we did with the other schools? Like having parents come in and just kind of run through this with them, maybe do 2 or 3 options for scheduling or something like that, or?
We definitely would. I don't think we're ready to do that yet, because I think there's still determinations or recommendations, just more direction to be added. So
Okay.
Facilities Advisory Committee is going to meet on Monday morning, so that'll be Joel and David, part of that meeting. We'll kind of just, I think, probably review this conversation and the board input, and then, you know, as you said, it's some additional traffic engineer, it's some additional village engagement, the variances. Also probably taking a closer look again at costs. So I see bringing it back to the board for more conversation before we take it out to the community. But we definitely, that was some of the feedback we had through emails, but also even from our staff this afternoon. You know, people are saying, when are we going to have more opportunity to sort of just learn about this? And, you know, I think an interesting question to the board is, do we want to consider recommendation, direction on turf versus natural grass before we take it out for community engagement? I mean, we know that there's a question in there, right? I mean, there's a question among the board, there's a question among I think our staff, so.
That's actually kind of where I was going. I'd love to get parent
Yeah,
input
I
or
would
just
love
general,
to.
whoever wants to come. I'd love to just kind of weigh out, is it 70-30, is it 50-50? I think that would be helpful to me.
So maybe go out there without,
Yeah.
you know, that part being
Everything
defined
but
in terms
that,
of
yeah.
the actual content of the surface, and then.
But if there was a
that feedback.
comparison that says it might be about this much short-term, long-term, it
Mhm.
might be about this much short-term, long-term, and like just having, I think just kind of getting community feedback on that space would be very helpful.
And we can do a cost of all the hard stuff, the parking lot
Yeah,
and the
yeah,
playground and the learning spaces, and just have these are your two costs and considerations when you start looking at what does that field,
Yeah.
what is that field made of?
Yep.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. I definitely want more input from the community for sure.
And Ramesh has had lots of practice doing that, so.
I definitely can appreciate that community input. I guess I'm very concerned, though, that it seems like what we're hearing from DLA seems to be in a lot of ways polar opposite from what we're hearing from some members of the community in terms of cost, in terms of usability. It's very concerning to me. that
Well, I
we're
think
kind
we
of
would
setting
get that
ourselves up.
information prior to that,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, I
I mean,
think,
we would have
in
concept.
general estimate, I think we'd be able to, I mean, nothing's gonna be solid until you actually put it in the ground and you have it, but. Yeah, I
Like,
mean,
Ramesh hasn't
I
done
think
cost
we're-
estimates on this design, like, this is the sort of first
No, there's not.
we're moving forward with
Yeah.
this consideration.
Yeah, I'm gonna put words into your mouth,
Oh.
while I have that opportunity, is you are not pushing one surfacing agenda or the other. You're presenting the options, and then here's the considerations that come with it. Usability is a big one. Usability is probably a very major driver in terms of if it gets wet, it's harder to work with. How wet, how long, it depends. And
We don't know, that's why we
Right,
as a
we don't know.
community, I think the community, all of us need to look at some real data.
Well,
We don't-
and
we haven't
we
seen,
will, but that is going to be a significant difference in natural versus artificial.
Right.
Maybe,
Artificial is, you can rain on it, you can dump a bucket of water on it, and it's good to use in 5 minutes. Natural will not have that instant usability. That's going to be,
No, but as far
Probably
as
the
long
big-
term, that's
but
another question.
that's why I'm saying, considerations and concepts, and here's what we're looking at.
And I would just say, I totally agree that it should not be put on there whether, I know you're saying you're not recommending one or the other, but every diagram I've seen says turf.
Well,
I'm just
but
saying-
turf is a
No, but
horrible,
it says in the
descriptive.
diagrams, like, we talked about fill and artificial materials. So if that's not the push, please
Right.
don't diagram it that way or talk about it that way. That's all I'm saying.
I think what we have in our diagram is recreational field, and what we're trying to present are the two options. We've talked about the under drainage
Yeah.
system that is very similar. We've talked about usability, which, we can offer those comparable datas, but one has more, one has less. Grass field will have less, we know that. The costs, we can present those. So if there's any other information that you're looking for, we'd be happy to provide it.
I think the health concerns is the other thing I'm concerned about. I know last time, I'm really not trying to be argue, it's just last time you guys, and it's not your fault, you're not materials experts, and it's not your fault, because you're designers. But I would love to see more about what I'm hearing from the community that concerns me, and to see, what are there hormone disruptors, are there things that might be worth looking at? And that's what I haven't seen in the thought. So for me, it's not just about dollars, it's about what long-term things are we doing. Maybe it's nothing, maybe it's not, but I'd love to read about it. And that has nothing to do with you, your design.
No,
you're a great
I
designer.
understand.
You're a great designer.
It's a difficult
Yes.
decision, we're happy to provide any studies. There are many of them out there. Some come from industry, some are independent, so we try to provide some of that for both industry and independent last time, so we can certainly provide more.
Right.
So the 3 key things that Ryan said, I think what we need as a board to make an informed decision. I think the community feedback will help kind of just gauge how the community feels about it. That doesn't mean we go that direction, but I think it's an important aspect to take into consideration. So I think if we just have those generic comparisons that we can also present to the community, just kind of like so you know what your costs are and stuff like that. But I would really like to just hear the general feedback like we did with the other schools.
So community feedback, you said there are three things, community feedback, cost.
No, it's like Ryan was saying, it's the, it's like the short-term, long-term costs, like how much drainage would we actually need, what does that do to the field? I can't, there were three key things that you just said, and I'll have to go back and watch the tape, but it was the cost, the usability, and.
Well, the usability related to like a downpour, right?
Yeah.
Or
And then-
how quickly is it usable?
Right, and then there was, and then the cost that's associated with it, and then.
The other thing I talked about was the under drainage that's similar in either.
Yeah,
either
the total
system.
drainage, yeah.
And the health concerns, again, we're certainly not experts on that, but we can provide any information.
And,
It
yeah,
will come from a
environmental
source.
issues too, because we live in an arboretum, like, and we have a lot of natural space here that some of the communities that put in these turf fields just don't, and because they're larger and they have more stores, and so I just wonder, you know, something to think about is, does it match the rest of our community, and does that make sense? And so,
Yeah. And I'm not trying to push for turf, just the other side of it is most of the green space we have is unusable for a week or two after it rains.
And that's
So-
what I'm saying, do we know it's never possible? Have we tried to fix it? And I don't think, I haven't seen it yet, but I'd be curious to see, you know, is that possible? So, it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah.
But, and then one thing, Martha, do we know about the parking from the village issues or
We
not?
do not.
That's
So I think that's when
Yeah,
Ryan's
that's
saying
good.
more village engagement, that was something that was brought to my
That's the
attention
thing.
today.
If that changes,
Yeah.
obviously,
Yeah.
that's gonna be a big deal. But, well, I appreciate it, thank you so much.
Yep.
Thank you. I really like the design. So,
Does look
I
good.
don't know how the people feel about that, but.
I really like the two playgrounds, that's awesome.
All right.
Is this a reasonable timeline for next summer? Like if we stay on pace, is that a reasonable? I feel like we need to talk about it every month to make sure it
It will
moves
depend a
forward.
lot on the intangibles of the community input, compromises, and anything that we want that deviates from village rules requires a variation of classes, so. The planning aspect, the actual putting the pen to the paper and doing the design is certainly doable.
Yeah.
But these
I'm worried
other
about all the-
inputs that drive what that picture is really what's going to control this.
Because we need to go out to bid by January, I'm guessing, like all of our other timelines.
Earlier than that.
Earlier than that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I hate to be the one to bring this up, but this also costs money, and we have not discussed options and how we're paying for it.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what I mean? Like, there are avenues we can take.
Yeah.
I think that conversation needs to be had.
Because I would love to see this be a next summer project, but I'm just
Absolutely.
concerned we're running out of
I
time.
remember everybody last time going, how much?
No, right, right, this conversation's great, but if it
That's
comes back
right.
and it's $14 million, and we're gonna be like, well, that was fun.
Yeah.
You know?
I remember years ago, I won't say who it was, people saying, I'm not gonna spend more than $5 million on the whole district for facility, that's not possible.
No, I just think that's,
I
you know,
remember
once,
that being mentioned, yes.
so we're measuring it cost estimates.
I was gonna say, then we
That's
can
next
provide to
stage.
you, not only cost estimates, but also a rough schedule to give you an idea of
Okay, that
what
would
that
be
would
great.
look like
That
for
would be
the
good.
next
Yeah.
summer construction.
Because once we have,
We have a WRPD process, village process.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask you, is that running normal timeline, are they delayed still? Is it just on up in the air
They're
or
taking forever.
taking forever? I remember that before, I just didn't know if it had changed, but.
Well.
So we need to go
there-
now?
there was-
Yeah, you see, we should go to bid tomorrow.
There was
Yeah.
before, and then there's now.
Now,
And it's stayed the same.
right.
Yeah. Anything else? Anything else with facilities?
No,
Okay.
Sure.
just to note that actually this probably should have gone in board member comments, but my nieces have noted that certain board members' names are on plaques at school, so that's
I'm looking at.
on the plaque,
Oh, on time. Oh.
that for the renovation.
Oh, I was like, I thought you were talking about this, I was like, all of our names are on it. Oh, yeah, those, That is, I remember the first time I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, look at my name.
They were very excited.
I know, I took a picture.
Did you say your name?
Wait, what?
Our names.
No, who mentioned it?
There's
My
one
niece.
right out there.
In the renovation.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's on the other side near the gym, actually, it's on the other side near the gym.
There's one right at the foot of the stairs before you go up into the library.
Oh, okay. Paying attention.
No, we know that we've got some maintenance projects coming up this summer. There's approved. We're still looking at the auditorium.
We have all that on Facilities Advisory Committee agenda, so we'll bring back other pertinent pieces, obviously, all of you.
All right. Thanks, Joel.
I think this is definitely the biggest one, though. It's the one I hear
Yes.
most frequently when I talk to people, this is the thing that comes up.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Next, we have Finance Committee with Dave Barsati. He's not here. We do have a technology update, though, from Don. Sure.
Yeah, I was gonna say, this would not be a good
Well, good evening. Wanted to provide just an update, kind of 3-year road. We've been meeting with Martha and Jim and Dave, just looking at the financial implications of maintaining our current technology environment. And we're looking out over the next few years where we might have some peaks and valleys in terms of budgeting because of our investment cycles. So this is just going to be a general overview of a lot of the various areas that we take a look at. So we're going to cover our computing environments, our local premise, hybrid, and cloud environment, and how I think how things are, as everyone is really moving more and more to the cloud, the equipment that we do have on site, our network hardware, our connectivity, our devices, and just safety and security. On the slides, I also, if you've had time to review them, tech is a very acronym-heavy environment and has its own terminology. So I did provide some definitions to provide clarity. Exactly. So we talked about our computing environments. Local would be like if you're actually running an application on a machine. Premise is considered a server, but a server that's on site. Hybrid is something that kind of operates in both. And a cloud resource is something that just resides strictly in the cloud. This is not even a complete listing of all our cloud resources, but really just to give really a depiction of where in the last 25 years things have really shifted. I think if you went 25 years ago and you thought about your applications, well, they were installed on your device. They were installed locally. And what we've seen is that it transitioned to, well, there's a lot of applications that may have resided on a server, premise server, and it communicated with the device. But now things have really more and more are primarily located out in the cloud. And that is a subscription type service for our resources. Instead of buying an application and owning it, now we subscribe to it. So where we see more and more, we're shifting dollars from capital expenditures into operational expenditures. So you have that shift in budgeting areas for oftentimes. So what do we have on premise, server-wise? It was about 7 years ago where we replaced all of our Apple servers internally, which there was about 25 of them. And we got down to 2. And one of them is actually just a copy of the other. So what we did is we shifted the services into a virtual environment. Microsoft has a Hyper-V environment. We can actually run servers off of a lot of servers off of one server. So we consolidated, shifted, and got to that point. And over the past 5-6 years, even a lot of the services that we were running on that server have moved out to the cloud. So what do we have left? We have our directory services. We have some internal protocols that really allow our devices to connect to the internet. We have our phone system. We have our building access control, so our fobs to get in and out of buildings, the HVAC, our heating and cooling system, and our security camera systems are actually all, they're premise, but they're all individual appliances that run in each of the schools. They're not even technically on a server. So where are we going in the next few years? Really looking at shifting more and more of these resources, even as we replace them. Replacements are in cloud environments. Some of the services, as we move away to the cloud, for instance, voice is something we wouldn't really put into Microsoft's environment because there are service providers like RingCentral and Teams that is their niche. That is what they do, and you want to maintain that quality of service, reduce latency in terms of phone traffic. You want to be able to pick up the phone, get dial tone, and not hear any. So that would be not even in a Microsoft's cloud environment. That would be a service. But even if, as we move these into some of these into Microsoft's environment, it may only be for a year or two, because as they come up for cycle, there will likely be services that they strictly run in their own cloud environment, and it becomes more of that subscription service. So we could get to the point in the next 3 years where there's nothing we really have running in Microsoft's environment except maybe our directory services. And even to that level, to what extent we'll be dependent upon that, it would still to be determined. So our premise network hardware is what we've really become then more, looking at continued replacement. We're not going to be getting rid of our firewalls, our switches, the things that connect us to other networks or a wireless network. That stuff really becomes the main hardware that is going to be on those cycles, whether it's 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. So far as it stands, with all the equipment we have, and we've had it for 3 or 4 years now, depending on the equipment, there's nothing right now that has any end of life determined. So usually with equipment, you will know a few years out whether or not this equipment is scheduled to be non-supported by the manufacturer. We don't have any network equipment to that point. So in the next few years, we don't have to worry about replacement. Now, maybe upgrades. We are looking at an internet upgrade next year, which would require us to replace our firewall in order to allow that bandwidth on site. And we have some minor expansions within networking, really just one additional switch, because we have some devices, some access points that are beyond, from a distance standpoint, we need to put additional switch in. And we have some wireless network things that we're going to do, very minor. We're going to add some high density access points like in the auditorium, so that just allows for more people the ability to connect. That's a newer technology that we can then leverage to just provide a higher level of service. I'm also going to be doing some network optimization this summer with construction. We noticed that when we got back after construction and then we went right into the pandemic, until we were in a situation where a lot of people didn't come back, they weren't necessarily we weren't at full capacity. And with some of the equipment that was taken down, some stuff was in the process of the construction companies taking, some equipment went missing. And so we've replaced it, but there's still some fine tuning. We're not running as smoothly as we were prior to construction, so we know we just have some minor fine tuning to do with that. And that we take care of over the summer, so that optimization. But there are no upgrades needed. Connectivity. This would be a change. This would be a large change because the plan would be to not only increase our bandwidth significantly going out to the internet, which would become more dependent on. We'd also look to change our internet service providers. We've been with Comcast for a number of years, but we moved to the Illinois Century Network. Now, Illinois Century Network is a state agency, and it is subsidized by the state. One of the benefits to moving to this is that a lot of the services that we're paying for through Comcast now become fully subsidized between the state and E-rate. So whatever E-rate doesn't pick up, the state would. What we end up paying is a connectivity fee to the ICN. So in connection to them, It doesn't get us down to zero cost, but it greatly reduced cost in terms of internet connectivity. Now, that is also dependent on the state, longer term, saying that they're still gonna pay for everything. They could, and as of right now, that is the plan to continue that funding to fund the ICN resources.
Do you know, I know that the state has spent a lot of time and effort trying to expand their network specifically down the state, to connecting to community college and such. Do you know how built out they are at this point?
I'm not sure how built out there, but they have made it very lucrative, especially for the areas that are underserved or not served at all, to connect to it. And this is part of it as well. So not only be able to get the connectivity out to them, but to have to cover all the costs associated with it. And the way E-rate works is, depending on your free and reduced lunch numbers, that determines the percentage discount that you get off of the service. So for instance, if, I'm just use for round number sake, if our internet bill was $1,000 a month, it's not. If it was $1,000 a month, given our level of free and reduced, we are at a 30% discount. So we only pay $700 of that.
That's what I was gonna ask, how much do they pay? I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, so, but if you are an underprivileged area, you might be at a 90%. So now the state is only picking up 10%. So as more districts that have a lower percentage of E-rate reimbursement come on board, then the state's picking up a larger portion of that.
Do you know anything about the functionality of the Century Network versus Comcast? Has it the same quality?
Yeah, I mean, Comcast has been very stable for us.
Yeah.
It's something that, because a lot of school districts are on it, and a lot of school districts that, where I'm on, a lot of the same listservs, and it's, I mean, they have had outages from time to time, but it's something that I'm keeping in tune with, because that obviously is a concern. The level to which, since we would be getting a very large subsidy, what we could also do is add the redundancy.
Right.
So that would be just a broadband connection into the school, so that in the event there is outage, it cuts over and we still can get our core services.
Brought a failover to another provider, correct?
Correct. So that's where we probably keep like a Comcast or an AT&T to fail over to that. Now, E-rate does not cover redundant services. So you're not going to get any type of a discount on a redundant service.
Do we pay the redundant provider connection, whatever you want to call it, a retainer of sorts, so that they're accessible when we need them?
Well, the redundant service
instantaneously available, and then we start paying money to them as we
No, it's on. It's on all the time. It's your insurance policy, so that you know who's connected. Yeah. Now there are some things that you can do. We might be able to port some services over so that it's only going out of that connection. So you're using it and you're taking some burden off of your main network. And that's something we could definitely look into. So the end goal really is to improve services and really to reduce costs with this. So overall, I think we're really looking to kind of be cost neutral in what we do, if not save money in certain things. Devices in classroom tech, I know we had a little bit of a conversation before the meeting about some of the classroom tech. All of our devices that staff and student use are on replacement cycles. We talked about that during the pandemic, there are some devices that got lower utilization. You know, our projectors, not necessarily document cameras, because staff were taking those home. Our copiers, our printers, but then there's also stuff that got heavier usage, our devices. And so our devices, especially at a couple of the elementary schools, definitely need a refresh, but they're on a cycle. And you have to remember, a lot of these devices, these are the ones that kids had at home the entire time during the pandemic. And now, since we've come back, we've really, instead of being one-to-one just in school, especially at the lower grades, now staff, students are taking their devices home more. So there is also that transport component that can lead to some breakage.
Oh, sure.
So we also need cases for that. So There are some things that have had to go up a bit because we're providing a higher level of service, and so we need to make sure that we can support it.
Although I really liked that when, like Martha was talking about in the winter when the weather was bad, that our kids took it home just in case. I thought that was really smart, like, that we were able to do that, so in the event something happened, we're ready, because you just don't know anymore.
Yeah, and again, that, in order to do that, it's the extra cases, it's the extra chargers, it's the, because.
And they're banging them around in their bag tag or whatever.
This might be an irrelevant question, but how do those replacement cycles don't make sense to me? So what do you, if you got 3, 4, 5, do you carry it to 6, 7?
No.
No.
So what we do is, the devices that go into school, stay in school.
Okay.
The middle schoolers, they get a device in 6th grade.
And then they give it back.
And they give it back, but we use those, when the 8th graders graduate, we use their devices as spares.
Okay.
So it keeps us with a pool of spares. Every year, we get a pool of spares that we can then, we always make sure there's enough devices in the district that a student shouldn't be without a device. They can go to the office, do a swap, then a repair goes out, depending on the device, either they get their old device back, or they just use the device that they've been issued until.
Do you send them out to be repaired? Or do you
It's a
in-house?
combination.
Depends on what it is.
Right, we have a segment of our devices are under warranty, and those we send out. They're warranted for accidental damage as well. But we do also do in-house repair.
You just troubleshoot something little and you.
Exactly, unless it is physically broken, a lot of the issues can be just very software related or operating system related, or it just needs to be, they're a reset. But even with some of the hardware stuff, going back to our spares, with the devices we've maintained using same, from a brand perspective. So a lot of the parts are interchangeable. So do we want to send something out for a day, or actually for a week, or do we just want to fix it here in 15 minutes and it's back on?
For the devices that you get back at the end of 8th grade,
Yeah.
how many of what percentage approximately are still worth keeping as spares and parts?
I would say 75%
Pretty good.
will go into our spare pool. 25% become the parts pool for that spare pool.
Okay.
Okay, and that.
That's not
No,
bad.
no, it's not, but there will be some things like a battery.
Yeah.
Once, the battery's been out there for 3 years, if it hasn't been replaced already. But there are diagnostic tools that we use. We can actually check to see the battery life on the units. So you could have an 8th grader that a month before graduation got a brand new battery. Well, we can run a diagnostic and say, well, that's a battery we want to make sure that we keep if it's designated as a part. So we can, we just make sure that we're keeping the good parts and.
So on a year-to-year basis, though, once they're, once you get a new pool in, are you recycling the old ones, or what's happening?
Yeah,
to the
we
ones that are
recycle
2 to
typically
3?
twice a year.
Okay.
Yeah, and some of the stuff we recycle is just scrap at that point, especially a chrome, it's a Chromebook that's just been picked apart for parts, and it's the shell and the, components. Then we will, over the summer, for instance, there will be devices that have value, that then we'll keep those separate, and those go out for kind of a bid, kind of a reverse bid. We show them our inventory, and they make us an offer on the equipment.
Other districts provide any additional hardware, like maybe the mouse as part of the one-to-one, or providing every student with, the same kind of set of headphones, or anything like that? Is that uncommon?
Other district, I think, I'm not sure exactly on like peripherals like that, but I think based on student need, we provide student what to request. In terms of headphones, like headphones are needed for a lot of our high-stakes testing. But oftentimes students have better headphones than we can do. They're carrying them with them anyway. But we provide, every year, these headphones also they're disposable. We're not going to take them back and clean them in the event. So we provide very low cost, kind of one use or one testing session use for one, entire testing period. Headphones that are usually available to the schools. But I would say at the junior high, I think we typically provide them 50 sets a year. Most kids just use
Just
it.
have their own.
I know it's not, most of you probably know this, like it was on the 3rd grade list, headphones, and you divide them, and this is part of the kit, that you get it.
Yes.
So. but I know they use them a lot.
Right, and so we have, I think we pay like $1 a piece for that process. You would be buying in bulk, you're buying
Yeah.
1,700 at a time. As far as the classroom equipment, and this was a slide that wasn't on the original presentation. The projectors, you're looking at when we replaced, they were actually a little bit over 6 years. We waited a little longer on that. But going with a 6-year replacement on projectors, 6-year on the document camera, 6-year on the control box, which is a setup that is in every classroom. Every classroom has like a short throw projector like you see, a document camera, there's not one in here, and then there's a control box, which everything essentially connects into it, the staff device, the document camera. But we've also added on these, there's actually a wireless dongle. It's an Epson piece of hardware that allows teachers to connect to it wirelessly. So that's the setup that we went with, and we last purchased it in fiscal year 2019. So it was summer of 18 the last time we purchased it. And so in terms of the cycle, these wouldn't be up for cycle during the next few years, but maybe a year or two after fiscal year 26, 27, where these are gonna probably need to be replaced. What we replace them with, really until that time, considering flat panel technology, that is something we looked at a few years ago when we replaced these. It was cost prohibitive. In a few years, it could really make sense. But we also have to look at, well, how does it impact, teaching? One thing that, having a monitor does, it does take away whiteboard space. So we need to make sure that, what level of whiteboard or whiteboard technology is incorporated into the actual panel, or is it in a separate area? Just lots to think of, but we have.
Does Epson still make those? I seem to recall maybe when we bought them last time around, were that kind of a last chance to get some of those things?
No, they are still making them. It's just really becomes to what extent do they continue to make them, and at what point do costs on projectors, just get greater and greater, or does the technology go away completely because it's just cheaper to do a flat panel production house?
I know, like at open house, like most of the teachers using their projectors, I'd probably let Angela speak to that, but do they use them during the day a lot?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, it's
Because I'm not there during the
continually
day,
used.
but I would assume so.
But we do annual preventative maintenance on these. The main thing with these types of units is they can get the dust, a lot of dust inside. So there's a filter on them that we replace every year that helps the device life and the actual lamp life too.
When you say flat panel technology, like this whiteboard that you're projecting on is actually a interactive, like it's the interactive whiteboard.
Whether it's interactive or non-interactive, I think that's the need. But but I know whiteboard space is always a premium.
Yeah.
Because even when we looked at, well, I know in my prior district, we put, smart boards, and they went over the chalkboards or the whiteboards.
Okay.
But they weren't themselves whiteboards.
Oh, okay.
The loss of that real estate of whiteboard space was, staff.
No, I mean, they still want it.
So, but it could be that it's something that is, external. Is it at the center of the classroom? Is it off to the side? Is it on a stand? Is it, those are all things that are gonna have to, be weighed up.
I know at one point in time when I was looking at those, it was probably a couple of maybe 3 years ago, they were like $8,000 to $10,000 a piece. So that price has come down. And I might not be talking about the exact same thing you are,
Right.
but they were very cool, but they were very expensive.
Yeah, they were expensive.
And so you're saying like that cost is substantially decreasing?
Yes, well, if you even just look at a regular, regular
Oh, yeah,
TV,
absolutely, yeah.
they come down, which essentially, that's all we have right now, is that what, you then have the whiteboard space when you turn it off.
Yeah.
But right now, all we have is projecting an image.
Well, theoretically, you have the whiteboard space with the projection.
Exactly.
So you could like circle your projection.
Exactly.
Okay.
So
Which
what
they
you
do.
need to invent is a TV with a white background that you.
Well, I thought they did. I
They
thought that's what
they have that,
$7,000
they have, there's software that runs on, essentially, there's an Android operating system on the device, and they have a white, there's other apps too that, you can, as a browser or so forth. So, but that, I mean, if we look at how that technology has progressed in the last 3 years, how far is it gonna progress in the next 3 to 5 years? You know, it's,
Do you get, and maybe this goes to Angela too, do you get a lot of commentary from teachers about how they're using the classroom technology and what they want to use and?
I think they're very happy with what they have. We don't get a lot of requests for, oh, can I have this, can I have that? And in terms of need, believe me, we know when something's not working. And that's really how you go by is I mean, it's probably the most critical equipment that we have. And so we went to a new ticketing system, which there's a lot of automation involved. Everybody gets notified if there's something out in a classroom. Like that is the highest priority. We go right there, make sure. 99% of the time, it's either bad connection. There's nothing physically wrong with the equipment. It's just a matter of making sure it's safety and security. We do have content filtering and student safety type services that run. So what this does is the content filtering limits access to websites, but the student safety portion also looks at what they're doing, the types of sites they're doing, the types of documents they're creating, what they're writing in the documents, and it will notify us if there's anything that could be potentially harmful to them or to others. And what we do is we work with the building principals. If we get something, some of the building principals at the junior high, they get the alerts too. And then they can act upon them immediately and involve any other services.
That's two-way, like what the student is trying to access and stuff trying to come in to access them, or is it just what they're trying to access?
It's just what they're trying to
Yeah,
access.
okay.
So it looks at what sites, I mean, inappropriate sites are blocked, and Securely is a service we use. Parents also do have access to set up their own Securely accounts, so they can see that information as well. We send it out a couple times a year to let parents know. And then from we have an internet safety curriculum. This is just an annual, teachers have to go through this annually. The resources are on the web. It's grade level specific, addresses the top concern for schools. Sarah Hickey was very instrumental in Jason in developing it, and it's just something that is revised through Common Sense Media on a regular basis. So this is something that teachers have access to in this time of the year. Now, these two components are tied to the Children's Internet Protection Act, which is tied to E-rate. If we don't do these things, we don't get E-rate discount. It's one of the things that we need to do, and we need to talk about that we're doing. That's part of it too.
Well, and then I get those emails that tell me what my daughters are looking at and secure. I thought that's kind of cool.
Yes, it allows you to be aware without having. It's a very passive technology that you can just you're just alerted. Most of the time, it's it's insignificant, but we have had instances where it has been helpful.
I know your team can also, I don't know, customize is the word, but I know for my daughter, I had emailed and asked to have YouTube completely blocked because she was on it during aftercare a lot. But then a lot of the videos, like the PE teacher would be like, go watch this YouTube video. And she couldn't get on it. So it was like, it was just challenging because I didn't want her to have access to it, but at times she would get assigned a video to go watch. And I'd be like, okay, here's my phone, go watch it on that. But yeah. So.
Give me my phone back when you get
How long is the video? So now it's helpful to get the reports because we can be like, we see that you were on this.
And you also see what
time.
You can also see what time they're accessing too, which can also be important too.
What about protecting student privacy and the things that they make? I realize you have a system for that too.
Everything is it's password protected. I mean, there's stuff that they create is on Google, but we even within Google, we get notifications if there's irregular activity.
Okay.
On every.
Do you ever have problems where something's trying to interrupt the system or?
No, I mean, because of the way we connect to the internet, oftentimes our Comcast connection shows up in Utah.
Oh.
So we're the originating from.
Okay.
So sometimes it might, but then it will switch back to here. So then sometimes you get these instances where you have an impossible travel activity. You can't be here at, you know, at 9 a.m. and then be in Utah at 10 a.m. So that's where you get the notification. Same thing with Microsoft, with our email. That is a system that gets really, I guess, pounded upon from on the outside in terms of hackers, because that we see the logs. We see, you know, somebody's account, you know, could be that their information was on the dark web, and now a bot is just trying to hit that. And we have, in those instances, we have implemented another level of security, especially if it's happening continually, and we'll get into that here, which is multi-factor authentication. Yeah. Oh, no, it's a good segue.
It just made me think about it.
Yeah. So we have had instances where if people, if users' access is continually getting, we're getting a lot of hits on it, that will implement multi-factor, but we're going to need to implement it on all our critical systems. So before the end of this calendar year, we're looking at all, with district employees, our financial system, our student information system, email, and then Google. We're not going to implement this because that would be kind of a nightmare.
Yeah.
Don, you noted that SEPA, however you pronounce that
Yes,
acronym, SEPA is tied to E-rate. Do you have to provide reports to the feds, or it's just?
I have to say that. Yeah, that's the report. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
But we are committed to it. so.
Exactly, yeah.
No, it's more.
Just making sure we are.
No, where it's more going is like, what additional work?
Like, what
do you
does-
have
no,
to-
I
like,
know.
Are you filling
Do you
out
have to
massive
provide-
amounts
No.
of forms? Are you weekly report to?
No, I just have to make sure that it's running,
Yes,
and it's
yes,
configured right.
yes.
Right, yeah. Actually, I don't think it's running. Yeah.
That's funny, that's
Yeah. But, you know, the thing with multi-factor authentication, it is that one thing, and I know it's going to be an adjustment to some staff having to either get a notification on their cell phone to get logged in, or, you know, whether you use Google Authenticator or some type of authenticator app where it actually asks you for a token or to put in a number. Providing that actual level of security reduces your risk so much, and that actually our insurance companies are requiring it. Like, we need to do it. Yeah.
And it was a big move for this. I've signed up for a lot of these, like, they give you the option, and it is so annoying, but like, I always do it.
I
And
know.
I just know that I'm like, every time, like, 3, it's like getting a Fort Knox sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna try to do it to where it remembers the device, so it's
Yeah.
not continual. So every time they want, you know, they're just, you know, waiting for a
Remember
text.
me, that'll remember me.
Exactly. Even if it's for 30 days, some of the things like, oh, yeah, for
Right,
30
right,
days.
Yeah,
check them out.
that's a lot better than every day.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
How does that work exactly? Like, the remember this, is there like something in?
There's a cookie.
It's just a cookie? Oh, okay.
Yeah. So if you usually,
But it can only
if
come
you
from
clear
this
your cache,
computer?
yeah, if you
Yeah.
clear your
Yeah.
cache, it's gonna
Right.
ask you for
Right.
it,
And
yeah.
that's why I'll ask you, you're on another device, this is okay, you know, right.
From a security standpoint, from staff education, we do subscribe to KnowBefore. We did really turn it down during the pandemic because I don't think staff needed, you know, to receive emails that were phishing email that we were creating, because some of them can get very, I think some staff find it a little stressful. We try to make it fun, but those will be thinking more. We did need another layer of that, so we took a little breather. And that's it. Any questions?
I have a big question, actually. Well, pertinent more to the folks right here. What is the replacement cycle on telecommunication equipment?
On phones? On these?
Yes, on this. I think
Well, I
this
know
is the same stuff.
some have, everything's kind of going the wrong way. We can provide you really any type of device as you want. So
No, I guess just in general, I think last meeting when I was remote was pretty bad.
Yeah, that was, yeah.
Now, I guess there were other things
Yeah,
going
there's
on
other
at the
things
time too. But I remember these microphones have been here since I've been on the board.
Well, this is their equipment.
Oh, okay. Well, I wonder well, again, it's not interesting to any people other than right here, but I do.
We can have a, yeah.
Do wonder, that it seems like it's when everyone was remote, we were golden, but having one person remote, maybe not so much.
Yeah, I think the change in environments can be, because we do it in, a number of places.
Mhm.
I know Martha and I have talked that, things when everybody's remote, it's like, that's when it's the smoothest.
Yeah.
It's just, there's a lot of moving
The
pieces
combination
in the
is hard.
audio.
Right.
Exactly.
Hybrid is hard.
It's definitely,
Yeah.
yeah.
Your teachers would say the same
Just
thing,
go
right?
old school.
Yeah.
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 They said, don't you just go old school?
I tell you, honestly, dialing in, because I've been remote, I've dialed into meetings just on the phone and I've done it
Yeah.
video.
Yeah.
Dialing in on the phone was better.
Yeah.
Head and shoulders
It's
above.
usually clear, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it's clear, you can follow the conversation. I mean, I know there are, like, I think it's like an owl is what we have in our office that literally looks like an owl. The head pops up and it brings in the sound from everybody around you. It's pretty good.
That's cool.
But yeah, I don't know. I don't want to spend too much time on it. If it's
It's
applicable to
something
other
we can
teachers,
definitely look into.
it seems a need to me.
That should be, I think that should be relatively inexpensive.
Oh, yeah, definitely so. Definitely
Because
so.
these things work really well for it. Like whenever I go back and watch the YouTube videos, like the sound things.
Yeah, I can usually
these
hear
things,
pretty
yeah.
well.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Don.
Thanks.
thank you very much.
Special.
So when we get through the new smart whiteboard, we're gonna need some more instruction.
Yeah.
All right. Next, that brings us to the Educational Committee.
Okay, so, if you would indulge me, I feel a little silly doing this, but I have a little tiny story to tell. I promise it's short. But I was thinking about Teacher Appreciation Week, and it reminded me when I was a little girl, a storm hit our town, and we lived in the country. Unbeknownst to me, the storm was severe, and somehow I ended up at my teacher's home until my parents could retrieve me. And she brought me to her home and made me ice cream floats and gave me all kinds of story times and all those kind of things. And later, as a young adult, I learned to love what I do, which is human anatomy and things like that. So I wanted to tell you something that one of my teachers told me and taught me. And it's about a bone called the atlas that holds up your head. Named after Atlas of Greek mythology, who holds up the world and supports the pillars that held heaven and earth apart, who personified endurance. So some equate teaching to simply conveying knowledge, but I disagree. To me, teaching is vital. Like the atlas, it holds up our eyes to things we haven't seen, allows us to hear and discuss new things, and is a pillar for building relationships. So it reminded me, of these teachers that I've had, and some of you might have the same experience that made a difference in your life. And so, our teachers have not only helped our children weather a storm, whether it's a pandemic, or whatever is going on in their lives, but also serve as the atlas in our community. They've held us preventing displacement and lifted up our children in difficult times. So wherever they are, District 96 teachers and the administrators, all of you guys, thank you for your endurance, but also your talents as you lifted them up. I just had a memory and I thought, it's a little silly, but I thought I would share. But they're, my own children have thrived here, and I know a lot of you feel the same way. So we're so thankful for them.
Yeah,
It's
no.
a little strange, but
No, definitely. No,
it just
thank you.
reminded me of being a child. And,
I don't have anything to celebrate about that to say, so, I was just reflecting, as I have a senior who's about to graduate, and just thinking back on the 9 years both of my children spent in District 96, just how amazing our teaching staff is, and just how appreciative I am of, I can see it now that they're older, like what a difference they made in their life. So just want to extend what Sherry was saying, that Happy Teacher Appreciation Week. We are so appreciative of the teachers in our district, and we're lucky to have the best.
Well, make sure
Well
they
said.
know about 8:54, that they want to watch the video first. Yeah, thank you. Sorry, Dan, I
It'll be
interrupted you.
No, I
the 1 hour 54 mark.
Yeah.
oh, you guys are okay.
No, Now let's talk about math curriculum.
Moving on, come and do that.
And I'll just say to Sherry, Linda, and to all of you, it means so much to our teachers to hear directly from you. I know they know they're appreciated, and this is Teacher Appreciation Week, and thank you for those comments on their behalf.
Good evening, hello everyone. So math curriculum, tonight we had hoped to present to you a recommendation for a new math curricular resource. But what we ran into was a great problem. We have two resources that really meet a lot of the needs that we were looking at, but still also pose some questions. And so we need a little bit more time to do thorough research to make sure we're making an accurate choice for our staff members and our students. We are working with the representatives from both iReady Classroom Mathematics and Everyday Math to set up observations at schools to see it in action with the kids. That will help answer some of the questions that we have. And then we're also working on setting up some Zoom conversations with some of the teachers who actually utilize the materials so that our teachers can ask questions that they might have about instructional practices and how students are engaging with the materials that they have. So just need a little bit more time to make sure we're making that right choice, and we hope to wrap it all up. We plan to wrap it all up by the end of this month to bring something to the board actually. And then in the board packet you had in front of you just some of the tools we've used when we met last Tuesday as a group to debrief on both resources that the teachers had piloted. And the first one was the non-negotiables that we had looked at, and so it has the things we wanted to make sure the curricular resource we pick addresses, looking at equity and that it meets the needs of a range of learners, of all of our learners. ELL supports, how it's addressing the needs of our second language learners. Assessment materials that are being used, are they aligned to the standards? That was one of the things that we saw was a concern with Math in Focus. So we want to make sure it's aligned to the standards and aligned to what we're teaching in class. The design and usability of the resources is huge. So we know that our teachers have a lot of stressors right now. We don't want to bring in a curricular resource that's going to cause them more stress. We want to make sure that it's usable for them, but also usable for their students as well. And then the technology resources are also usable, but that they're interactive and that they're addressing the needs of students, that they provide support, provide enrichment, and are engaging if we're going to be using them. With that said, we're not looking for a curricular resource that's all technology based. We want hands-on, we want this math discourse happening, we want to move from, we want to use the concrete pictorial abstract philosophy that has been instilled from Math in Focus. So when we talk about technology resources, we're not looking for that to be the teacher, we're not looking for that to be the majority of the program. And then I am looking at the professional learning that the programs can provide us, as well as the cost of the programs is very important as well. And then we are also addressing the culturally responsive teaching piece and just assuring that it has the high expectations for all learners and that all learners see themselves in the materials that we're using. So those were the non-negotiables as we talked about the resources. And then we took a score for both materials based off of that non-negotiable chart. And then also with teachers, there's always the feelings part too. So that's the hard data. But then we talked about now based off of your work with the materials, or like our math interventionists are on the committee and they've talked to their counterparts across the United States, not just within Illinois, who are using Everyday Math 4 and iReady Classroom Math. And based off of all the information that we've gathered from the piloting, from people that they know themselves personally, people that they know through their professional networks, looked at both resources and asked them to vote if they could say an unqualified yes to the resource, if they find the resource acceptable, if they could live with the resource but not especially enthusiastic about it, or if they don't fully agree with going with that particular resource but choose not to block it, or if they completely did not agree with going with it at all. And what we learned from the vote of the two resources is that the teachers who piloted it, who were actually hands-on with it with students, they're neck and neck on both resources. There are things that we see that are valuable in one, things we see that are valuable in another, and that was another thing that led us to say we've got to do more work, we've got to ask more questions. when we put in the teachers who didn't pilot it, it does skew it slightly based off of some of the information that they have from their networks. But for us, one of the things that we talked about, and that I've just continued to say to the whole committee, is that it's how the students are interacting with it and what the teachers that were interacting with the students, how they feel. Because what our counterparts might see in a different district may not be what's happening with our students here. So that's why we disaggregated the data for those who piloted and those who didn't. So with all of that, because it is so close, that's why we're asking for a little bit more time, and we'll come back in June.
Would you say it was neck and neck, is like everybody agreed that it's too close, or was it like 50% of people like one, 50 like the other?
Everybody agrees that they can live with it, that it's acceptable. But what we found is our primary teachers felt that Everyday Math 4 was a little bit more engaging for our primary students. So what we're working on is seeing primary classes working with iReady Classroom Mathematics, so that we can see if it truly isn't the resource, or if it's that they were piloting it and they haven't had a huge amount of professional development. So is there something about it that we don't know, to see how students engage with iReady Classroom Mathematics. Our intermediate teachers felt that iReady Classroom Mathematics meets a need that they're seeing in their classrooms, and that Everyday Math 4 might provide some, that they might provide a little bit more work for them, legwork for them when we're doing guided math groups, whether it's for enrichment or for support. And so we want to see small group instruction with Everyday Mathematics 4 when we go to observe, so that we can see how intermediate classes are utilizing that resource with small group instruction.
Okay. That makes sense.
It's a great question.
You talked about the discourse and then like using manipulatives. I know that's happening already in the Carnegie curriculum.
Mhm.
So I did one of those 6th grade parent things where you sit in the class and they have you do the math. And so are you saying that both of those have a nice transition for that 6th grade?
That is
transition
something.
to Carnegie, do they both feel like they'll transition well?
That's one of the things that we're looking at, and one of the things that we want to see when we go observe. I think that they both, and I know they both offer that manipulative, the concrete, pictorial, abstract reasoning. They both offer that. I don't know if I feel one offers it better than the other. And our teachers have had such great professional learning with Math and Focus and the discourse and math talks, math conversation, that I know that will carry on to whatever math curricular resource that we have.
I'd personally rather have it done well than just us do it. So I don't think a month is a big deal, but.
Thank you.
Definitely so.
How long was your current pilot? I know you said this before.
3 weeks for each resource.
Yeah, which doesn't feel like
It's a unit, yeah, it was just one unit. And then the other challenge with a pilot towards the end of the year is, like some of our 3rd and 4th grade teachers that piloted it had noted that some of the language is hard for students because they hadn't been in the program for the whole year. So now they're jumping in the spring. So some of the language and the terminology that's used in one math program wasn't necessarily used in Math and Focus. And so there's that piece that you're also trying to teach them as well.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And it's good when you have this kind of undetermined or close, it's good to continue rather than trying to force it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that. We make for it, the choice.
Definitely want to make the right choice because it's a resource that we're going to have for many years to come. So want to make the right choice.
So the next thing on the agenda is the state report card.
Yes.
Is that you as well?
It is me as well. So the 3rd release of the 21 Illinois report card came out on April 27th. As you might remember, the first release was October, the end of October, October 29th, and that one was all the metrics that didn't rely on assessment data. The second release was December 2nd, and that was all the school district level data, school and district level data, but didn't include the state level data. So this release now is the total report card that they're going to release. There is, if you go to the report card online, our access data, no one's access data is showing yet. I'm not sure why that is, because they had said that was going to be part of the 3rd release, but that's not there yet. And our DLM data is not there yet either. So I'm not sure if they're still scoring some of the assessments from the fall administration, or where the holdup is with that, but that's not on the report card as of yet. What you will see when you go into the report card is the, like I said, the academic data at the school and the district level. The school, district, and state level, you'll see our IAR state testing performance levels. You won't see IAR growth because there's no growth to compare it to since there's no assessments from 2020. You'd see participation rates, achievement gaps that are occurring within school districts as well within our district as well. There won't be any science assessment data on this year's report card. The state found that there was insufficient participation across the state to report on science assessment, which is really interesting because we averaged really high here in District 96. 3 of our schools had 100% participation in science assessment, and then the other 2 had high 90s, high 80s. You won't see early learning data for our kids report. So the kids assessment, because schools were some in person, some hybrid, some all remote, and the change throughout the year, we were able to enter kids' data throughout the whole school year. Normally, everyone enters their data by the 40th day of attendance, but we were able to enter all year, and so it really doesn't assess a child's readiness for kindergarten when you're still entering data in the spring, based off of what you presumably observed when you first, it was from when you first saw them in school. So if you were a school that was remote for a period of time and then you went in person in February, then it's 40 days from when you came in person. So there were people who were entering data from the spring, we entered it from the fall. It's not accurate data, so they're not including that on the report card this year either. As we know, the summative designations are not being reported. That was part of the waiver with that the Illinois State Board of Education had for accountability. So there are no summative designations for any of our schools. And then the equity journey continuum, they're actually going to start the graphic for that on the next report card. So the report card that I talk about in October or early November, that will be where we'll see the equity journey continuum. You won't see it if you go online right now.
And what data will they be using from October? What semester data? What trimester?
That will be from the 21, 22, nope, because that will be what's embargoed. That will be from the 2021
right,
school year
data. Right, it's a little
data.
old, which is weird.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we talked about that. Yeah, it's a little bit old, but it's something.
With all these things that aren't being rated, I mean, they theoretically could be going back to prior years, they're just not? As a comparison.
They could
I
have
guess.
gone to prior years as a comparison, but they just don't, for the things that aren't being rated right now, they don't have the data for the 2021 school year for different reasons. So like the kids' data, because it was across the whole year. IAR growth, they don't have because there's no growth, there's nothing, no score to compare it to from 2020 to see the growth over a year, because they're looking at the growth over a year.
I guess they, in theory, could compare it to 2019.
They could have in theory. They didn't.
Easy enough.
They could have, yeah, absolutely they could have, but for whatever reason, and we often don't know why the Illinois State Board of Education does some of the things they do, they chose not to compare it to the 2019 year. Part of it's probably because, though, like that's pre-pandemic, right? So that's all the things that were happening in education before the pandemic, and then you think about how, even here in District 96, how we've changed how we instruct because of the pandemic. You'd be comparing apples to oranges if you compared it to pre-pandemic data.
Why the science thing though? Is that not mandatory?
Science is mandatory.
So like, how do they not have enough participation? They just chose not to do it?
Well, for us, so this year, our science participation, while it was high on average, we did have those couple of schools that had 98% participation or 84% participation, because if they had a high number of remote students, and those parents chose, because we were hybrid then, and those parents chose not to bring them in for testing, then they didn't take the test. So if you think about other schools where, like down south especially, where they stayed remote for the majority of the year, they wouldn't have had any students to test.
Gotcha, okay, that makes more sense then. All right. I read that and I was just like, I don't understand how this happened. Okay.
And then just some numbers, you know, we knew that the scores would decrease from 2019 to 2021. That wasn't something that was going to be surprising when we saw it. It did decrease for the state as well. It decreased across the whole state. We had a larger drop in ELA than we did in math, but we still performed better in ELA than we did in math. So we started off higher in ELA in 2019 than we were in math in 2019. But even with a smaller drop in math, we still performed better in ELA.
Adding to that note, I definitely appreciate the extra attention to the math, because that has been a gap for a while. So in addition of just like implementing something, I think we need to implement the right thing to kind of get us where we are, so.
Yes. And, you know, across the board, across the schools, because if the district's average decreased, then the schools decreased too. But they still were showing high, all of our schools showed high, compared to the state levels, showed high performance. So our schools are really to be commended that throughout a pandemic, we're still maintaining almost twice as high of a rate of performance than the state. So, any state report card questions?
Report then, what's our have the minute.
Right, there isn't much to report.
Something about incompletes.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Incomplete.
All right, well, thank you.
And then I just had one other thing under Education Committee. We agreed that we'd be keeping a cycle kind of update on our strategic plan goals. So really Don sharing was really under goal 5 as it relates to technology in the budget. Under goal 4, that's our family and community partnerships. But I did just want to take a minute and share just a little bit globally as well, just because we just had a strategic plan, living the plan workshop with Arlana Bedard last Friday. So all our action team leaders, there's 17 of us who were together as a full strategic plan implementation team essentially. And it was a really good day, really good workshop. We've done this now several times periodically over the course of the year, really with this goal of making sure we're not living our plan in silos. That I brought this because it's so easy for us to all live within our goal strand, and I think to make sure that we're looking at those overarching goals is so important. And then, well, honestly, we spent a lot of time on this side of the placemat at our workshop, which I also thought was really valuable time spent together and just acknowledging, are we really addressing our values and our vision and really some of the original purpose of putting this plan together, sort of why these goals and strategies became what they were identified to be. Do they really relate to those identified values and visions? So that was a really valuable part of the day, I think, for everybody. Then the teams were given time just to kind of dig in and work within their goal area. A lot of continued conversation, particularly around a professional learning planning team, around social emotional learning. Those are probably 2 of our most complicated parts of the plan in terms of the fact that this is work that's been sort of going on prior to the plan, and then the strategic plan represents a refinement in that overall process and some clarity around our goals. So we keep progressing, just really appreciate the commitment of this team at the end. Sounds a little silly, but Arlana had partnered us all up and we had to give each other genius awards in terms of identifying what the others had done really well. And it was, I should have recorded it. The people said just such great things to their colleagues, and not just, I like you and I like working with you. It was very much, very, very specific around how people on this team have really been working so hard with a really clear commitment to the plan and commitment to student learning and student climate and culture and to each other around sort of high quality staff. So it was a really good day, and just wanted to point that out. I did share the overall agenda with all of you. If you have any questions about that part, happy to answer them.
I know this is out here, I'm pretty sure this is out here, but do we have the list of all the participants that are in the, like, do we have parents, we were talking about having parents, did we ever find parents?
So
that
the
were part of
action
family?
The action team leaders are just staff members, so
Right.
that's and we do have a document, it's on the website, right, the one that identifies who the goal champions are,
Yeah.
and then who the action team leaders are. Then on the actual action teams themselves, which then are larger committees
Right.
led by those action team leaders, it's the Family and Community Partnerships group that has parents on it. So
We
that's
did find parents.
We did find
Okay,
parents that are participating, and so that's what the Goal 4 update is really specifically around, the Family and Community Partnerships. I'm the identified goal champion for that area, and I co-lead that group with Sarah Hickey, who's our instructional coach. And so it's just been really enjoyed that part, just also kind of looking at it from administrator, teacher, and parent lens. Been some very valuable conversations. We've taken certainly a part of the year just sort of coming together around where we want to go, where we want to go with this action team. And so one of the things we had talked about and are talking about is a family engagement survey.
So we had looked at, there's an organization called Panorama that creates an open source free survey available to school districts. We did look at that, we dug in on that. We also, interestingly, just received our 5 Essentials survey results. As you all know, we get about a 30% participation level from 5 Essentials from our parent community, and so we always sort of struggle with, is that meaningful data to us with that level of participation? But actually at our district leadership committee today, we spent a little more time digging in on that. So as a committee, this group, we want to look at, Sarah and I want to look over the summer a little bit more about 5 Essentials, this family and community, family engagement survey from Panorama, with the idea of maybe next year on parent-teacher conference time, putting out a survey to families. In particular, this committee really was intrigued by the ideas of kind of trying to measure what are barriers to family participation in the educational experience, and sort of this idea of school fit. You know, do you see that the school is a good place for you as a family and for your child, and that those are important questions. Interestingly, 5 Essentials does dig in on some of those same big ideas. It's just, again, how usable is that data and that information. So the other thing I think this committee has the potential yet to do, and we did this with kind of by way of one example, really digging in on some of those unique student learning opportunities, the service learning, project-based learning, outdoor education. We looked at Laredo Taft, which is the 6th grade introductory outdoor education overnight field trip that our families take. And it's something I think I mentioned that you know, the teacher coordinators noticed some drop off in participation pre-pandemic, and is there some reason for that? Is it a money issue? Is there a cultural issue perhaps to any of that? So she did a great overview for the committee to look at, and then really just took it back to, why do we do this? You know, it's really meant to be a key part of a transitional activity to Hauser, really connecting students, certainly providing outdoor education as sort of the venue and the context for doing that. But we'd love to do it with some of our other field trips and project-based or problem-based learning activities over time. So I see this committee as kind of formulating around being a really valuable sounding board for just kind of some key ideas where that unique opportunity of having parents and teachers together to look at things that we are doing within the school environment. So I think this group is still kind of taking shape as we met 4 times over the course of this year. But I think actionable next steps are just around student learning, family connections, you know, improving climate and culture overall, really with that truly embracing the whole child and fostering that passion for learning when we connected it back to our values and our vision. So, any thoughts or questions about that? I will say, even from when we did our initial strategic planning, and Dan, you were there, right? And Wesley, right? The two, right? Yeah. Then when we started talking about family and community partnerships, I found myself confused. Are we talking about kids getting jobs in the community? Are we talking about trying to make money? You know, I mean, like, what do we really talk to? Yeah, they are planting trees tomorrow. They're gonna be busy. As Casimir said, they went from thinking there was gonna be 1 lovely tree to 9, and these kids are gonna be working hard tomorrow. So, but thoughts about that, because I think, you know, this one sort of has maybe a different flavor than student growth and achievement, the learning environment and culture, and our high quality staff. Those feel, well, they all feel like.
This one's definitely a tricky one because it's such a web of stuff that can possibly
and just trying to come into our defined area. I just want to make sure that.
Go ahead. I mean, getting community involvement is always, it's by any method that's been tried, it's a difficult thing to be successful at. You know, particularly 5 Essentials you were mentioning, low participation rates. I think I swear I've heard before that even though our rates are really low, we actually are above average in terms of participation in it. So I do think it's a great thing to have a committee with parent involvement, as well as folks from inside the district at different levels and different responsibilities. I think it's sounded like where you're saying that that's becoming a good sounding board. All of that makes sense. It's sounding like it's perhaps the consultants knew what they were doing when they proposed that to us. It sounds like we're getting good results out of it from what you're saying.
And I think a well thought out survey coming directly from you, I would be more likely to fill that one out than one that's like, oh, this is just something for the state. I think a lot of people are just like, what does this actually do? It's not like
Essentials is always hard to interpret what exactly it means or how to answer it as a result.
So I think it's a great, I like that you're already thinking of things you want to talk about, you know, like I think we tend to like to survey the community, but it's usually like, we need to vote on this in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
What do you think? You know, like, as opposed to just like, what's your opinions? Nothing's changing tomorrow, but we just want to know, how do you feel about this? How do you, I think, like, looking at your agenda, I think everything looks like it's moving forward.
Yeah,
you know.
I was very intrigued by that panorama survey thing. So is that like, because you two just sort of answered some of my questions. I've always been trying to figure out why participation with 5 essentials is so poor. And with even with 30% being double the average or something, what do you do with 30% response rate? And that's not a representative sample. So I've always struggled with that myself. How does this panorama survey differ from 5 essentials?
You know, I think there's probably some things that are very similar. Linda, to your point, and maybe even without being able to articulate that, it's that District 96 specifically, you know, as a committee, or whether as the superintendent, you know, sort of giving context for it, and kind of it maybe feels a bit more personalized in terms of the outreach. And then I think we would customize some questions. So there have been questions like the Hauser start time. We could ask about artificial turf if we wanted to, you know, I mean, but you know, this idea of then add on some things that we are interested in knowing. We kind of did that with the kindergarten survey too, right? I mean, we're certainly looking to understand parent impression, opinions, thoughts about full day kindergarten, but I think we ended with kind of an open-ended. Is there anything else you'd want to tell us about the district? So, and as you know, with that one, we had 700 parents participating. So.
Yeah, but
I think there's something about the 5 essentials that, like, when, as a parent, as I'm and you know, going through it, there's a lot that doesn't even apply to our district. Like, how are your computer labs? I don't know, you know, like, or just like, I don't even know if that was the question, but I just remember there being questions that you're just like, this obviously doesn't mean anything. And then you have to do one.
I definitely recall difficult
like,
wording
start
and
by
hard to
the
understand.
oldest.
Yeah, then you have to do it by each kid
Yeah.
in the district, so I think it just, you know, if you have several children, it's, you know.
And I also think we all get so many emails. Honestly, there was one time that we had a survey done when my oldest was at Hauser, and they had stations set up, and we were taking a survey right there because we were there for the parent night. That was really effective, I think, because when you get people that are already there to do something, you say, please sit down for 2 minutes and take this, you might get more participation than the email.
And that was 5 essentials, and that was November, and it jived
Yeah.
perfectly with parent-teacher conferences, and then they changed the timeline.
Exactly. I just remember being there and going, thank you, this is right here, I don't have to worry about it later. Knock it out while I'm waiting for my slot with the teacher or whatever.
I think I just know if I'm going to spend 15 minutes doing the survey, if I know it's going directly to you, or directly to the district, as opposed to going to the state, which is then going to go, you know, I think I'd be more willing to do that one.
Yeah.
But I guess we'll see.
And they would have, any of those customized questions, they would help craft those questions, because surveys are very tricky.
Right, so they have a survey. It's actually got 7 different domains. They recommend that you only choose a couple of them. It's like some are really around, like views of my child's instruction, and the teachers looking at it said, this is interesting. Maybe we'd ask those questions, but for the district to ask those questions didn't seem as meaningful. And we sort of again tried to talk about the purpose for the committee. So the questions are formed by Panorama as a company. They just make them open source. I think you and I had talked about this, and I said there was a fee. The fee is actually if you want additional interpretation of your scores.
Do they give you baselines or comparisons or anything like that? How we do compared to
other schools? So they're a national organization. So, you know, again, different than 5 essentials, that's very Illinois specific. But that's, let me find out for sure what the comparative data, and that might be the part that you then pay for, which actually, if we get a good response, it might be well worth it. I originally thought we had to pay for the survey. The survey is actually open source. But the questions are already formulated. You adopt the survey. As a matter of fact, Panorama put out an open source survey early on in the pandemic. I think it was just before we were contemplating do you want your child to come back to school? Do you feel safe to have your child come back to school? So a lot of the questions in our survey were actually from the same organization. They're really kind of a comprehensive social emotional learning is I think really how they would identify their mission and goals as an organization. So they have a lot of different components of.
Yeah, I think that having a professional put those together, I think is helpful. Because survey wording can be tricky. People, even this survey will be interpreted by each of us differently a little bit. But having the experience of like writing those and just with that kindergarten survey, we crafted something up relatively quickly. And even in the comments, people were saying something like, "I don't understand this question," or "If this is what you're," it's like, okay, I get it. Like so
So that's what the
They're hard.
Family and Community Partnerships Committee did at our last meeting, is they actually looked at the survey, the full comprehensive survey that Panorama publishes, and then they picked like within those domains that the barriers to school engagement and school fit seem to feel most pertinent around really addressing some
And then if we
climate
send it out, like putting it in front of parents and parent teacher, we can pick when it goes out or like how to engage with it, try to increase participation. And 'cause I definitely think more regular feedback on the broader stuff is good. I haven't come up with a good solution of like how do you.
Right, I don't think we have
everybody
really,
asks
really-
you to,
yeah.
you just bought something, take the survey.
Yeah.
Yeah. Enough of the surveys already,
Yeah,
so.
too often and they get sick of it.
Yeah.
That has to be enough.
Yeah, so I think we're still trying to find that, 5 essentials alternative or 5 essentials supplement that feels like it informs us even more, so.
But just reading through your notes, I mean, it sounds like the committee's got just a very large span right now, and it's, so
Yeah.
there's a lot here, so figuring out how to narrow it down is probably going to be the challenge.
Yeah, for sure. All right, thank you for that feedback.
Education committee's done.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything from policy committee this evening?
Well, you all have been very busy on your committees, but policy for right now at least has been quiet. So I don't have any formal updates. I think Martha mentioned I had an opportunity to attend the EdRed 50th celebration legislative dinner, and yeah, it was interesting to learn. Got to hear from State Superintendent Carmen Ayala just on some of the learning renewal and recovering from the pandemic, and kind of those pandemic relief funds and how ISB's aligned those with their strategic kind of plan and different programs that are available. So I haven't had a chance to kind of debrief with Martha about what, if anything, that means for us or our district or what might be relevant. And then, panel on social emotional learning. So just interesting to hear what some different districts are doing. Various board members from other districts, superintendents, some of the attorneys from Franzek and other firms that represent districts. So, yeah.
Thank you for joining me then.
All right.
That's it.
So you must have been taking a vacation. So.
That means basically, that's what I just said. Vacation.
All right, so then that will bring us then to the personnel committee.
I actually got one thing for everybody tonight, and it's a conversation that's been on pause for roughly 2 years, and stipends. So Martha and I met last week, and this was pretty much the only main thing on our radar right now, and thought it would just be a good idea to get this back to the table and just kind of get you guys thinking about it again. So just maybe a quick recap of where we last left off was just trying to figure out what are we trying to accomplish with stipends. I think is the big question, and we just need to chip away at what we're trying to accomplish. We spend roughly $150,000 a year. Is that right? We don't know. We've had the conversation about balance between schools, but you need people to lead the various committees, and so it's just a very odd, I guess. It's not a straightforward conversation, so I think we kind of need to figure out what do we want to do with this and how do we want to deploy it, what are some of the things to think about. There's a lot of just stipend roles for advisors or supervisors or whatever that might be, but then there's the student-based ones of student enrollment. So one of the things that Jim has been putting together here, which is all I think probably I'm gonna guess fuzzy at best because we never tracked this officially in the past, but trying to look at the student enrollment numbers and try to make some assessments on that. So we'd had some conversation in the past of like Parks and Rec, if you don't have so many students, they cancel the class or whatever you want to call it. So do we want to take an approach like that, or so just a lot of open questions that we've had from the past. So really, this was just not. I guess if anybody has any feedback or anything, we haven't talked about it for a long time, so I'm not expecting a lot of robust discussion, but kind of just getting it back in front of everybody and hopefully move that forward over the summer possibly. And I can't remember the dates you gave me, but we do need to have, my guess is we'll probably just say, do this, go forward, and like we can track some more numbers or something, but maybe throughout the next school year, we can have some dialogue, like ongoing dialogue, and then by this time next year, maybe we have some better direction of how to go forward with it on a more stable basis.
We used to have rec representation and input on some of these items?
Yeah, so there's very specific language in the contract, which is what
Yes.
Wesley's alluding to, is that I meet with the REC and other administrators, and we look at any additional requests that are being made for stipends, really falls more into that co-curricular extra clubs and activities. And the REC and the administration look at it kind of around value to students. But even that committee, I think at times we sort of scratch our head and say, what are we doing? Because then the language says specifically goes back to the Board of Education for approval. And that's really, as Wesley said, exactly, that's where we landed before the pandemic. Is I think as a board, you had said, help us understand kind of, yes, there's a very specific process per the contractual agreement we have with our staff, but then what is the board's role? Are we doing it from a budgetary point of view, value to kids? It's both. And so how do we create that balance? So you do have a little more data around the enrollment and numbers. So Jim and Michaela Miller have created just a nice system around when it's time to sort of do the timesheets. Essentially, they also submitted an enrollment number for us. So trying to bring you more data on that because I think it may help just in the long term. And you know, this may be an area that we sort of take that closer look and say, this works. I mean, we know these activities provide opportunities for kids for that additional engagement beyond the school day, those additional relationships with caring staff members. So there's a lot of value in this. As you said, it's $150,000 of the district's budget. So is that something people would want to see expand, shrink, stay the same? Something in between. Jim, you look like you're standing. Maybe there's more you'd want to say on the topic? Or
I should have, I'll try to have numbers next meeting for the average number of students this year. These are pandemic numbers, and this is kind of the next year.
Well, and we have some that are event-based, like Science Fair might have 200 kids, you know, but it's one event, and then you have others that meet every week in a really intimate, small groups. So I think it also matters about what type of event it is. We have coaches that meet several times a week, and really also goes to how many hours they spend. So that's why the rec was helpful in their input. But besides the kids, it's also good for the staff. It's development for them. And I think, I'm speaking for myself, it's an investment into our teachers and developing their skills because they get closer to the kids and they share something that they know. And it's, from what I've seen, they really enjoy the ones that do it. I don't think they volunteer for those hours. It's not like they're getting, you know, $1 million to do it. So.
And those dollar amounts per the activity, even per co-curricular, are spelled out in our contractual agreement.
Right.
And since I probably thought about this more than any of you, my general thought is I kind of look at this, it's not an official policy, but I kind of look at it like a policy. So kind of getting to, you know, what exactly is the board's involvement? Like to me, we're governance, so we put a box around it and then it's executed by the admin team. Like whatever the requests come in, it's like, okay, it fits within this box, yes, no, whatever. And then I really do look at our goals, just saying like a minimum enrollment or a maximum spend or a spend within plus minus whatever percent or something like that, just to give a little bit of wiggle room or some big picture view of what this would look like and let the details be handled by the admin team.
Yeah, I certainly don't want to micromanage this stuff.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, but it's not of interest to me, and I don't think it's the right thing to do anyway.
Yeah.
Our teachers, they're a little bit familial. Each building has their own, like we have a garden club here, which may have different, we have a running club, but Central might have different people involved in other things. I said this before, but that's why it's a little tricky because it's based on the staff talents. And we don't want to, in my opinion, discourage some of that.
Yeah.
It's hard to make them equitable all the time.
Yeah, and that was one of the conversations I think we had 2 years ago. Is there a way?
Because our staff are unique, and that's what makes their building special.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true.
Just looking at the list, like.
I think I agree with you to look at it as an overview place.
Yeah.
Let them handle it.
And we want to talk, like, I remember we had a very long dialogue about, oh, Hollywood has all these and other schools don't. It's like, yeah, but is that okay? Like, that probably is okay, and I'm not trying to take things away from people, but we just never got much further than that because other things got more pressing.
So they did.
But I agree. I do not want to manage each one of these committees and clubs and things. Like, we don't need to be doing that, but just giving some direction on, okay, we're comfortable with.
The stipend committee is facility. But
Yeah, so that's the stipulation in the contract, that the stipend committee must meet, which is really REC
Let them do the
leadership
details, yeah.
with administration, but it specifically says it goes back to the board.
And that's fine,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it's a financial piece, and
Yeah.
we can't ignore that we're paying.
We'll approve it if it fits our box. I mean,
Okay,
it's just-
okay.
Yeah, right.
Just the checks and balances.
Okay,
If
yeah.
that's what you wanna do,
Yeah.
yep, we're good with it, fits our parameters, and I don't think we need to nitpick it every year, as long as it fits within our box, then we approve it and we move on. That's kinda how I'm looking at it, but I think there's a bit of dialogue to get that box filled,
Mhm.
so to speak. That's it. I yield my time.
All right.
Linda knows about long talks.
Well, I guess just-
Yes, that's why I'm kind
One-
of.
one thing-
Conversation, I'll be honest with you.
That was something that was not productive.
Okay.
Just one quick thing, I guess, where in terms of, once some schools have more than others, I guess, I think that would be something we'd love to, I would like to see encouraged,
Mhm.
where you have schools that have clubs that are being enjoyed and kids are participating. Is there a way to try to migrate that and
Yeah.
take that look to see, okay, maybe this school doesn't have this yet, is this something that we could try to bring that over? And
Yeah.
again, but that's not something that we're involved in necessarily. That's
Right.
something that we'd love to see more of, at least personally, I think I would love to see more of
Yeah,
that.
I would agree, and then that probably means that our stipend budget needs to go up. So as we decide how much money we want to spend and what that looks like, I definitely think that's, in my mind, that is the conversation.
Yeah.
Because I agree with that, like, there's a lot of cool stuff going on at one school, but is there just not an option? Is there not a sponsor? Do they just not know? Like, is there not sharing? Like, who
Right,
knows?
so someone has to be there with the kids, and you
Yep.
can't just have nobody.
No, just go play the street.
People play.
All right. We getting to the end?
Yeah,
That's it?
Yes.
All right, let's see, is there any public comment?
There is not.
Really? Should we ask for some?
No.
All right, if not, future meeting dates. May 18th is regular business meeting, 7 PM in the Hauser Learning Resource Center. The board will enter into closed session at 6:15 PM if necessary, and return to open session at 7. June 1st, 2022, Committee of the Whole meeting, 7 PM in the multipurpose room at Central School. June 15th, 2022, regular business meeting, 7 PM in the Hauser Learning Resource Center. Board will enter into closed session at 6:15 PM if necessary, return to open session at 7 PM. And if there is nothing else, this meeting is adjourned.